If you want to flip us live, I'll behave myself. Anyway, all right, good evening this evening. Welcome everyone to the Tigard-Tualatin work session this evening. And this evening's focus is to look at a series of assessments and analysis of our student performance or understanding. And with that, I will hand it over to our superintendent, Dr. Ricky Smith. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Patty, I believe you have the slide deck, and if I could please get you to present. And while she is pulling up the slide deck, I want to say thank you to our great guru relative to assessment data, Paul Verstraete, and to our TOSA team relative to literacy instruction and math instruction, Katie Beckett, and our newest member, Elise Cohen, who we rightfully kidnapped from iReady and brought over to the district side, which is just an awesome opportunity for us to have that kind of technical expertise as we're rolling this assessment out. And certainly I want to say thank you to Director Robson and to Dr. Lisa McCall, our Assistant Superintendent, for their support. And this evening we're going to, as you have the data set already presented to you in your board packet, our goal this evening is to do two things. The first is just a light touch relative to winter assessment data, which you have in the packet. And then the purpose of being in a work session format this evening is to do a deeper dive into the new set of assessment tools and what that means in terms of the board's pursuit and the district's pursuit in terms of closing the equity of opportunity gap for our students, and how that is a more refined tool and one that is more directive and assistive to teachers in terms of making instructional decisions that will address those gaps. So with that, Patty, could I have the next slide, please? So the overarching goal, as a reminder, as this is a quarterly report to the board relative to my evaluation goals, was the implementation of Ready Schools Safe Learners guidance that maintained, while keeping students in a safe stance, a focus on core instruction and equity of outcomes for all students, regardless of the instructional model, whether it was a complete distance learning model and or hybrid model. And now that we've had the opportunity to transition into hybrid, the last data set that I will present to the board at the end of the year will be the spring data, and we will actually have hybrid data that we can then compare fall to winter and winter to spring. Next slide, please. And relative to the superintendent evaluation standards, this refers to standard 5 that addresses what is to be taught with an emphasis on how it should be taught. And I don't need to read the rest of the standard to you, it is here. But the focus again is relative to instructional leadership and how we leverage how I as a superintendent think about instruction and number 1, and how I connect the board policy to the classroom practice. Next slide, please. Paul, this is, I believe, to Director Fox's question, what was the N in terms of who we tested? And so you can see for the winter, this winter, Acadians, how many kinders were tested in Acadians, which is the grades K1, 2, the former Dibbles. And then we had 71 in parentheses that also tested the iReady assessment at that level for a total of 770 students. And you can see then working your way down the N as to the number of students who tested for and provided winter data. Paul, is there anything else you'd like to say about this slide?
Yeah, the only thing is that with the iReady, it was available to kindergarten through 2nd grade, but it was not our main focus for analysis. So in the early grades, we continue to use Acadians to provide a deeper analysis.
Katie, would you like to speak to the decision here relative to K2 using Acadians versus iReady?
Well, the majority of that decision was made just based on testing environment circumstances this year. and not wanting to it took a very long time is what I'm trying to say, to do Acadience virtually. And since it was brand new to teachers as well, brand new to families at the early grades, Acadience is much more, it assesses foundational skills much differently than just a fluency score. And so it gave us quite a bit of information without over-testing and over-taxing families in this comprehensive distance learning environment.
Yes,
So
because typically, board, for your information, this would be tested by a teacher in proximity to a student in the classroom. And so because of our commitment to understanding student achievement of content, Paul and team did a yeoman's job of adjusting this assessment to the best of their ability to the virtual standing. And so that needs to be taken into account as you take a look at the data. That this is the first time that what should have been done face-to-face in person was attempted through a virtual means so that we could get at the data. Next slide, please. And so the data here that you have, basically the assessment suite was aligned with the assessment needs. So K2, again, used Acadience for literacy. Grades 3 through 5 used iReady reading, and 6-8 used Maze. And you will see here that all grades saw a decrease in scores ranging from about 3% decrease at the third grade to 43% in kinder. And please note the asterisk here that says the assessments were most likely affected by at-home administration of assessment for first-time takers. So you had two potential confounds. One, that it was being administered at home, and number two, that it was being administered to students who'd never had an assessment administered to them before. So that needs to be taken into consideration. Next slide, please. In mathematics, you can see here of the total students, how many in mathematics were tested from kinder through 8th grade. Next slide, please. And here, as you remember, there were no spring summative assessments given last year, either internally or externally, using the state assessment. The state assessment was canceled last spring. So we do not have those scores. And as you looked at your data sets that were provided to you in the packet, you'll notice that we are missing data for the 1920 year relative to summative assessments for that reason, because we had pivoted late in the year to complete virtual online and remained in that stance to the end of the year. And the state made the decision to withhold further testing that year. Although we do not have scores for winter of last year, Paul was able to basically pull the data in a way that we could take a look at, was there any potential for growth, or was growth realized? And we did see an increase in students who are in grade level at math from the first assessment given in the fall of this year to those that had the most recent assessment for the winter data. So there is progress there, even in a virtual stance. Next slide, please. Okay, and now we're going to take a look at the assessment suite in depth, and we'll take a look at what assessments, in terms of assessment literacy, there are, just briefly, I know boards, you've heard this before, but I know we have others who are with us this evening that are viewing our streaming. As you know, the set of assessments there's a summative assessment, which the focus of which looks at how much learning has occurred during the course of the year. That's number one. And then back off from that are interim and formative assessments. Formative assessments are assessments that are given throughout the year to assess how a student is progressing towards learning a particular set of standards. Interim assessments basically take a look in almost a slight summative way of what has been learned so far. Both formative and interim assessments should be written in such a way or have questions asked in them that are predictive of how the student would perform on the final summative exam, in this case, the state exam. Each have a different purpose that the district uses in terms of determining what a system response needs to be versus a classroom level response. And the reason that I'm grateful to Katie and to Elise for being with us here this evening is that they will provide you with some in-depth information about how iReady helps us get a really great look at and diagnosing a student in time in the classroom level versus the abilities that a summative assessment has that is not as facile at doing that, but can be used as a screener. So with that, could I have the next slide, please? And I believe, Katie, this is you.
Yes. So I want to just talk briefly about this slide here. As you know, TTSD is a response to instruction and intervention district where we serve students in academics and behavior based on a multi-tiered model. And for academics, we include assessment, curriculum, and instruction in each of the 3 tiers. Tier 1, down at the bottom, or core, includes assessment and instruction we provide to all students and is sometimes referred to as a core. That's why it's in parentheses there. And assessment data we collect in this tier is analyzed in our 100% meeting structure. So as we go through each assessment today, you'll hear that terminology of 100% meeting. And that's really tied to the core, where teachers and specialists come together to analyze the health of our core programming. And in an RTI district, a healthy core is defined as one where at least 80% of the students are at benchmark on any valid, reliable testing measure. And then supplemental to tier 1 is tier 2. And in this tier, we serve students who need additional support in reading and or math in order to reach or maintain grade level goals or skills. Students receiving supplemental support in tier 2 are progress monitored. And that data is analyzed in our 20% meeting structures, where teachers and specialists also problem solve how to respond instructionally to groups of students and their trajectory or growth toward their goals. And then in tier 3, this is where we serve students who are well below grade level. They need intensified and individualized intervention to accelerate their progress toward their goals. And so today, when we move through the assessments, I will briefly explain how each one is used in our 3-tiered model in kindergarten through 8th grade. And we're going to start with our state assessment. And I think, Dr. Sue, you're going to explain that a little bit.
Yes, thank you. Next slide, please. So the state assessment, as I said, is summative, and it's meant to take a look at across the system of a district and across the system of the state. State summative assessments can and unfortunately have been used to try to make some diagnostic statements about classroom performance. But the challenge is that particularly for smarter balanced assessments, the data comes at well into the summer, if not early fall of the next year. And so it cannot be used or should not be used to make a prediction relative to classroom performance because it is so late in coming. It can be used as a screener for students who are moving towards state proficiency. And then what should the system as a district and the system as a state be thinking about in terms of digging deeper and asking questions? Why is this band of student consistently not performing or lagging behind in percentages performing on summative assessments relative to other groups of students? So that is an appropriate use of a summative assessment. It is not an assessment that should be used either to evaluate teachers, nor to performance, nor to evaluate instructional moves. But it can be used as a screener and should be used as a screener. Last year, we did not have the data. We did not test based on ODE's waiver. This year, ODE has provided districts with 2 options based on the fact that the Department of Ed federally is requiring districts or states to perform the state assessment. And so ODE's statement to districts has been, you can either opt in, which means you can give parents a choice of saying, yes, they want to take the assessment and you provide that opportunity, but the district is saying, we will not provide that opportunity unless there is a request to do so. We have seen Portland Public take that stance. We have seen Salem Kaiser and other districts across the state say that they will not provide the state assessment. In so doing, they are out of compliance with Division 22, which directs districts to provide an annual summative, state summative exam. TTSD's stance and my recommendation to the board is that we do provide the opportunity for testing to remain in compliance with Division 22, and we provide parents with the information that we provide them every year, which is there is state law that provides them an opportunity to opt their student out from testing if they so choose. What we know this year is that because of the way that ODE's waiver that was approved by Department of Ed is structured, all students will not have access in all grades to the assessment. There will be reading in one case and math in another and other subjects. And Paul can give you a more definitive list around that. But the data set will be grossly incomplete. It is really more of a compliance issue that we are offering this assessment and following the guidance that ODE and the directive from the Department of Ed federally. But this data will not match data in previous years, and it will not match data in the following years when we come back into full brick and mortar, have students fully engaged in the state assessment and in testing conditions in which we can control the test environment as we normally would. Paul, is there anything else you want to add here?
Sorry, trying to find my mute button. No, just that we are offering to families the opportunity to schedule testing. We're doing so with as minimal impact on what little time that we have with our students in the buildings. And so our priority is around honoring that time that we have with our students. That is the plans that we are making. That is our number one priority.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. So we expect that the N will be small and will not be either provide statistically valid nor reliable data. The blueprint for this test does not match previous years, nor will it match subsequent years, and therefore is an anomaly in and of itself. And again, to highlight the point, it is a compliance exercise versus truly trying to gather data that can help inform allocation of resources and professional development opportunities for across our district. Next slide, please. And you see, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, not to interrupt. I mean, you really explained how we use state testing, you know, in tier 1 perfectly. So it is not to inform instruction, but to just give us an idea of how that group of students performed the year before and how we as a group of teachers might respond to any gaps or dips in that data that we might see. We take a look at it in our 100% meetings, but it's not the tool we use to inform instruction. Same thing, you can see the exhibits, the examples of the reports that we can get. We can look at historical information, which is helpful when planning at the building level, at the district level. It can be disaggregated into special populations as well to see how we're doing with closing our gap over time. But it definitely does not go down to the classroom or individual student level at any of the tiers, really, other than to serve as an additional data point when looking at making decisions for students. So if you click to the next slide, please. Same thing. So it's just an additional data point alongside the progress monitoring information that we get on our students who are receiving supplemental support that may either corroborate what we're thinking or cause us to pause and say, okay, wait, how did this student perform so well on this test, but not necessarily in the classroom? It just allows us to problem solve those issues when in our 20% meetings. Next slide, please. So as Dr. Sue said at the beginning, our Acadience test, or formerly known as DIBELS, is a screening tool that we use K-8, and it's given to all students. So in tier 1, the data indicates, again, the health of the core. We're looking for that 80% threshold for a healthy core. It's a very quick screener. It does not go deeply to diagnose what the specific issue is. It just tells you, oops, here's a flag. There might be an issue here that you need to gather additional information on to know how to best serve the student or groups of students. And And the report you're looking at here is called a Summary of Effectiveness Report, and that's used at the grade level to show how students are growing with their instructional recommendation, whether they're at benchmark, maybe they're strategic, which is the yellow, or intensive, which is the red, so they're well below grade level. It can show from fall to winter, or from winter to spring, or fall to spring, how students are moving within those different bands. So you can see fall of first grade, that's what we're looking at here, to winter of first grade, the benchmark grew, which means we got more students to benchmark, and the intensive shrunk. And that's what we want to see. So that was good. So that's how we use this measure in Tier 1. Next slide, please. So students in Tier 2 are getting supplemental support in reading. And those students are progress monitored on a bi-weekly basis. And so the measures we select for these students are matched directly to the skill we're instructing them in. And we use Acadience because it's sensitive enough to that growth that we can see incremental, we can see if a student is growing on a bi-weekly basis. So you can see this is an example of an average, a cohort average report, which basically just says in this reading group, in this intervention group, this is how the group is performing along their aim line. So we also use another report that shows how students, individual students in the group, are performing along their aim line, and we can see which students in that group are on track, on the right trajectory, and which students are not. And the students who are not, we then problem solve around what changes or adjustments do we need to make for those students instructionally. Next slide. In Tier 3, the way we use Acadience, Tier 3 is where students are well below grade level, so 2 or more years. The example you see here is a 5th grade student being monitored at a 3rd grade level. It allows us to set their goal so that we're expecting accelerated growth, not just, we wouldn't want a 5th grader to grow at the same rate as a 3rd grader would grow throughout the year. We want that accelerated. And you can see the red dots means that that student is not performing along their aim line. And so incrementally, when we have our 20% meetings, we're going to be problem solving around what to do individually to intensify this intervention for the student. So that's how we use progress monitoring data in our Tier 3 with our Tier 3 students. But again, the Acadience data is used to measure growth, but it does not tell specifically what the gaps are or how to close them instructionally. We have a lot of programming that we use and placement testing for those programs that we use to ensure that we're matching the right program with the student need. But if you turn to the next slide, please. Ta-da, now we have iReady. iReady is a new assessment for K-8 this year. And it's new to us, but we've already learned a lot by using it. It's a diagnostic assessment that all students take in reading and math 3 times per year. And it doesn't only it gives detailed information on reading and math foundational skills and standards, but it also provides the instructional support to go along with it. So at Tier 1, we'll use the information again in our 100% meetings, not only to see the health of the core like all the other measures, but also then what instructional moves can teachers make to address the grade level strengths or areas of growth. So the reports shown here, this is a math example, I believe. It shows how the information is shown by skill and standard, and then disaggregated by multiple subgroups. So this is a math example, and I think we have a reading example as well. And so teachers can actually dive deeper into this data to see what the strengths are of their group in their classroom and what the areas of need are.
And Katie and Elise, I just want to give you a time check. I want to leave about at least 15 minutes for the board discussion and questions. So we are at not quite the bottom of the hour, so just as an FYI.
All right, I will talk quickly. I actually only have one more, I think. So if you go to the next slide, I think that this is really where iReady in tier 2 and 3. Oh, that's just the reading example that you can take a look through. There. Oh, Paul, sorry, I skipped you. Go ahead. You're next.
No worries. So with the next slide, in the slide that Katie was talking about, we were talking about the data that iReady provides to us within their system. And so they're able to provide us data on our students by grade level, by school, by race and ethnicity, and by gender. However, there are some data points that are not loaded into the iReady system itself, but that doesn't mean we can't analyze that data out of iReady, because we are able to export it. And so if we go to the next slide, what you have is an example of how we do that. And so in Exhibit 6, I was able to get our data analyst, Scott Birch, to export all of the data out of iReady for the winter assessment. And then identify all of those students who are at mid-grade level or above. So they are where they should be, or where they are estimated to be by iReady or above that grade level for the mid-year. And then do that for me with every domain. So each of those individual domains that Katie was talking about, we are able to see what % our students for each of these programs are at mid-grade level and above. And so this exhibit, the purpose of it is to show that just the system itself, the iReady system, does give us a lot of granular data and helps us analyze that data. But those areas where the system doesn't have the data in it, we are still able to export that and identify areas of need for our programs in particular. So we can see for our special education students, ELD, as well as our TAG, and as well as a program unique to us, our two-way immersion program. And so we're able to see the data by whatever indicator we want to put in there. I do want to make one note that as you go through that exhibit, you'll notice that there is a bit of a difference between students on grade level in math versus on grade level in reading. This is a trend that has been seen across the country. In a recent article by, I think it's the Renaissance organization published in the Wall Street Journal, math has been identified as being one of the hardest hit subjects across the country. So Renaissance is a national organization. They took a national sample and compared their math and ELA scores, and they saw that math was by far harder hits across the country. So we are unfortunately falling within that trend as well. However, our reading scores again, matched across the country in that they are slightly lower than where they would be if it wasn't a pandemic, but not hit nearly as hard as math. So this is just a bit of a note about how we can use that data, that the potential of that data itself. So moving on to the next slide. We also get the next couple of slides, Exhibit 7 shows that we have a good partner in iReady in that they are even willing to sit with us and dig deeper into the data itself beyond the reporting. So this is a slide they presented to us, I believe, a couple of months or so ago, where they were able to take their own national samples, just as Renaissance was, and compare our scores to them and highlight those where we were areas of growth we needed as compared to the national sample, as well as areas in which we were operating above the national sample. And so they were able to help us identify those areas. And so we have a great partner in iReady for that. Moving on to the next slide. The last part I want to talk about with that is part of their presentation to us was talking about how to forecast using the data, which is really helpful and as we're looking forward with our needs. So they have something called typical growth and stretch growth within their data, and they identify all students based on where they place on the assessment. And if they reach typical growth, this is where they will be on the next assessment. And then they also identify a stretch growth, that 30% of students meet this stretch growth. And so they are able to help us identify possible outcomes of the next assessment so we can better plan to reach our stretch goals. And so they're able to identify what our data might look like if we are reaching these individual targets. And as a data person, the idea of forecasting growth really appeals to me and is another reason why I like the iReady assessment. And then the next slide. I believe I'm handing it back to you, Katie.
Yes, and I think that this is really where iReady shines in tiers 2 and 3. So the information provided by the diagnostic assessment gives robust information on where each student is performing. And the reports actually, you can pull reports that group students into cohorts for small group instruction. So it provides appropriate, and it also provides appropriate lessons to use for those students. So, and this can be students, I know I'm talking about tier 2 and 3 on the next slide, but this can be students at grade level, well above grade level. It really takes that differentiation lift off the shoulders of the teachers in a sense that they have not only the assessment data that they need, but also then the tools, the appropriate tools and resources and materials to differentiate with students more effectively. And this data is also used in our 20% meetings when we're making decisions about whether or not groups of students are making adequate growth. And then also in tier 3 where individual students, if they're making adequate growth. And I think Elise is going to walk you through the report that you have here and how it's used.
Yeah, so I'm going to show you a couple of different features within iReady. This is all based on that diagnostic data and some of the things that are done within the system that teachers can use to be really pinpoint their next moves. So the report that's showing here is called the prerequisite report, and this uses the diagnostic data to really help make those instructional decisions about upcoming grade level mathematics. And so it identifies what are the prerequisite skills for this upcoming topic, and it's going to provide some potential groupings of students based on how they performed on the diagnostic on those prerequisite skills. So it gives us a sense of who's likely acquired all of those skills and who's going to need varying levels of support. And then it also includes some recommended resources for either whole class instruction or some small group instruction to help prepare students to be best ready to go for that grade level instruction. Next slide, please. So in addition to the school-wide data or the class data, we also have the data for individual students. And this is where we really dig in and we can see the individual's areas of strength and areas of growth. So each, whether it's in math or reading, it's broken down into the domains and we can see how a student placed in the domains. In this type of a report, we can also see how they're growing over time. So as they take that first diagnostic to the second, you might be able to notice on that blue bar, there's a little arrow that showed how much growth was made between that first and second assessment. The green band there is showing what on grade level is. And so we can see the student's placement with regards to the grade level performance. And then there's also the typical and stretch growth are also there. And then they also, once again, provide resources that can help pinpoint where the student is at and then what might be an appropriate support for that student. Next slide, please. And so building on that, we have what's sometimes called My Path or the personalized instruction. And this is where iReady is kind of creating, I like to think of it as like a playlist. It is a personalized set of lessons that are designed to really meet the kid where they are. It will target their areas of need. So this is where when a student is not at grade level, it's going to help go in and fill in those gaps while they continue to receive that on grade level instruction during class. And if a kid is working above grade level or at grade level, it's moving them forward wherever they are. And these lessons They go through a progression. We can see on this report that those blue bars there, and there's the green strip, that's the grade level. And then we can see how the student is making progress over time. So we're able to monitor this progress. We can dig in and see what these actual lessons look like. And if we want, we can actually assign specific lessons, and that's something called teacher assigned lessons. So there's a lot of capability. I know that this is relatively new, and so people are currently just trying to figure all of these things out, but this is some of the potential that is there. Next slide, please. So this last piece, standards mastery, is something that is very new in the iReady program, and it is not something that we're currently using at the moment, which is why the example report here is taken from just sample data, so not our students. But this is a separate assessment that we can assign, and what a teacher or a school would do is to target specific grade level standards, and this allows us to monitor that student's understanding and develop their proficiency. This is available for grades 2 through 8 in both math and reading. And it can be used as either formative or interim assessments. And so this is one of those things where we are working currently with iReady to think about how this best fits into all the different pieces that we have, and how we can start using this with our students next year. Next slide, please.
Thank you. So I'm going to round this out. And as a reminder, board, John Hattie, who is a researcher of over 30 plus years, taking a look at effect size, what things work in terms of instructing students and what don't, has, in fact, is known for making learning visible text. Speaks to the fact that one should anticipate at least 1 year's growth in the student who is at grade level and has all the supports necessary in terms of housing stability, food stability, healthcare, meaningful adults, so on and so forth. For students that are impacted by economic insecurity or poverty, you can add another 0.5 or another half year of growth that you must see each year. And if you add other confounds, such as food insecurity, homelessness, you can add at least another half year. So in some cases, particularly when you are looking at our strategic data, the red data, these are students who have multiple confounds that they are navigating. And the beauty of iReady tools is that it helps us to diagnose that, as you saw this evening. You can see what the stretch goals are, and you can literally plot it as to whether the instruction is making an impact and addressing those needs. So as we think about the language, as you are working on crafting the equity policy and getting after equity gaps, this is the kind of data that we need to be able to direct instruction in real time and bring a team together, the entire school team, not just the individual teacher. But how does the school build efficacy as a community so that kinders transition to first to second to third, gaps are either addressed and closed so that the student can move forward, or the learning is extended for our advanced learners and our tags so that we are now able to get accurate look at what rate and level really is for that student. So it personalizes it across the spectrum of learners, which is a tool we have not had in this district heretofore. So first and foremost, in my role as an instructional leader in this district, which is my chief responsibility, connecting the board policy to classroom impact, the first is now building assessment literacy capacity for our school administrators and leaders. We have spent a great deal of time building capacity around SEL, trauma-informed instruction, culturally responsive moves, as well as equity in general. That is in service to providing now instruction that is targeted to the needs of the student and will close the academic gap while still engaging students in a safe and warm environment and climate where families feel safe and engaged, where students feel safe and engaged. And as you notice here, I have outlined 4 bullet points that Dr. Lisa and team and I will be working beginning this year and going into next year with our school administrators. First, building their capacity for assessment, data analysis, and action at the building, classroom, and individual's student level on a monthly basis through their leadership training meetings. Second, building capacity to develop a school-based leadership team that is not just the principal, but includes the building equity coordinators, the family partnership advocates, the instructional coaches to support staff development and implementation of that support. And then the third is to build capacity to lead, develop, monitor, and evaluate staff capacity to own their data and to make the right instructional decisions and moves and shifts that address the individual student and close those gaps. And then build capacity at the school level for data-informed student conferences. So teacher working with student, and when parent conferences come, if I were still an elementary teacher, I would be showing the iReady stretch goal and target for my students for both language arts and for math, and say, this is where your student is. This is where I'm projecting your student needs to be. Here are the things that we are doing currently in the classroom. Here's what I need you to reinforce at home. Relative to central office moves, what moves do we need to be making in support of building efficacy at the school level as a community? Dr. Lisa McCall and Secondary Director Fields will continue to assess and monitor progress towards the SIP academic and social emotional goals by doing what they have done this year again, monthly school visits and classroom visits, but most importantly now, show me your data. Show me your iReady data, show me your literacy, show me your math for your entire school by grade band. Tell me where you have concerns, tell me where you have successes, and how do we build from those. And then relative to my role as superintendent, monthly school and data analysis conversations and meetings with the cabinet to assess and adjust our own instructional and operational supports to principals and to teachers and to schools in terms of professional development and resource allocation, fiscal resource allocation. And then my monthly school visits will also be to assess and monitor progress towards their SIP academic and emotional wellness goals through the data reviews. So I too will be asking principals, show me your fall data, show me your winter data, show me your spring data, tell me who's moving, tell me who's still stuck, tell me what you need to build and address that efficacy issue. But again, it is a systems response that then says when we talk about equity of outcome in the board policy, we are able to say how we achieve that at the classroom level, and here is the data that backs that up. And with that, we are at 5:45. And I want to say thank you to the team for that walkthrough. And I now leave it open to the board for questions, comments, and discussion.
I have a question. Patty, can you go to slide 13? Is that possible? I am, I think I finally figured out how it transitioned, but, okay, the first question is, when we say the 3 different levels, and I think we hope that 80% fall in core. I guess that's the first question. Do we, at any given time, do we hope and expect that 80% of the kids?
That's the goal, knowing Director Emerson that may not happen, but certainly by the time we get to spring, that would be the arc of a full year's worth of instruction and growth and intervention that we would have. Our goal is to have 80% or more students in core.
So that's perfect for the follow-up, in that we're measuring different things at the 3 points in time. So we could have 80% in the fall and 80 in winter and 80 in spring. It's not that we're going for 80 over the year. It's that, is that what we're measuring?
We're always, yeah. And I think, Katie, I'm going to offer and then please step in. Our goal is always that you are keeping those students moving, because remember, the content increases in complexity. So the cognitive load is going up as the school year goes on. Okay. And so we anticipate that there will be some adjustments within the data that some students, while they may have performed well with this cognitive load, when that is stressed, it may blow open a gap for them. And that's the purpose of the tier 2 and tier 3 monitoring, is to say what blew open, what was closed before. And now, because that standard has become more complex, what are you not understanding now that we need to address? Or hopefully, students are saying, yeah, you can stress me with that additional load because I'm getting the instruction and I'm able to access that instruction in a way that allows me to remain in core versus in strategic or intensive. Does that make sense? But I will tell you, particularly for our Title I schools and having both taught and administered Title I schools, this you have to pay attention to, because it's telling, just simply because you think they got repaired at the grade before, as the cognitive load goes up, those same issues will blow open if you are not attending to them. It's much like, if I could use an example, like a diabetic, and I know we have those who understand that as long as everything's in balance, I'm good. My food, my insulin, and my activity. But the minute I stress one of those, I may blow out and I have to adjust. And it's the same issue here. Katie, have I totally botched that, or?
Not at all. No, I mean, that is exactly how it works with iReady and in the fall, winter, and spring. With this particular slide with Acadians, the measures are actually end of year measures, but the benchmarks change throughout the year. So, for example, in kindergarten this year, 60% of our students came to us in the green, in the core this year in the fall. As that benchmark went up in the winter, we lost some of those kids, if that makes sense. So our goal obviously is to not lose kids, but also to gain more kids in the green, if that makes, and then the spring benchmark would be the highest benchmark, and the one that would indicate if they met grade level goals.
And what I would put to that point, when she's talking about those students that follow up, as the cognitive load goes up, when you look at current data, the reason we've had challenges closing those gaps is that we're pulling through a very discrete cohort that's still able to meet the cognitive demand. Mm-hmm. Without really changing any way in which we're instructing. What these tools do now, we finally have tools that help all teachers see that all student gaps can be addressed and closed if we're intentional about it. And it doesn't have to be just that core group that gets self-selected out over time, but that everyone gets to play and everybody can close their gaps. That's really the goal of these tools, is to inform that. And I think the one gift of the pandemic, and I say that with air quotes, has been that all of our children's needs has been laid bare. We understand the disproportionality relative to who really gets it now and who doesn't. And teachers really see that. And what I'm impressed about is that since this is a new tool for our teachers, they have really tried to work, even in difficult virtual situations, to leverage these tools and address this. And it will only improve when we can be back in classrooms where we know we can control testing conditions and where we can have those face-to-face conversations. I see nothing. This is an incredibly promising practice. It is exactly the tools that I wanted our teachers to have so that they can address this and really get after those gaps in a very diagnostic and targeted way.
I have a question following up on the teacher operationalization piece, which is, so do we have a sense of what % of teachers who have access to these tools are utilizing them? And what is the district strategy to make sure that that the teachers themselves are prepared and trained and have received the professional development they need to?
So Director Bowman, relative to percentages, I would defer to either Director Robson or Katie or Elise. Relative to, I would refer you back to slide 25, relative to the systematic way you train the principals in assessment literacy. So if we can go to that slide, please. So you are training them in assessment literacy so they understand how to read these reports. You then provide them with the frameworks for professional development that they and their team of BECs, FPAs, instructional coaches, and others will deliver that instructional support and professional development at the school level. You train them as to how to then evaluate and support teachers as they are rolling that out and looking at their data. So when it goes from fall to winter, and remember, they are also making classroom visits and observing instruction. And then where there continue to be gaps, you collaborate as a building, either grade level or K1-2 teams or 3-4-5 teams or whatever combination you need within your school to address that data and say, we've tried all these things. Why is this child not moving? And those are the conversations in the space. Now, I will tell you that in our contract, we have language that is somewhat problematic relative to getting extended blocks of time relative to collaboration, but I know the TTEA is very interested in having those conversations and is supportive. And so that will be work that's in front of us while we are instituting the things that are on this slide.
So Dr. Sue, follow. Oh, Ben, did you have another question?
I was just going to see if Todd had the information on teachers accessing.
Yeah, I don't have percentages down to a percent, but we introduced this about 1.5 years ago, the math iReady diagnostic to our middle school teachers as we were going through the process of looking at our math curriculum adoption. And so we had some folks pilot that, and then we brought it fully to the team. And so all of our middle school math teachers have used it across the board in terms of the diagnostic. And then we brought MyPath, that MyPath individualized pathway program on board as well. So that's why I don't have the percentages specifically to that, because it's really pretty new. So as we've brought this on board, we trained our teachers, as Dr. Sue was saying, very specific around assessment literacy, giving the diagnostic, what is it, trained them how to give it, what it looks like, but then once they gave it, then pulling them back together to really dig into the data and analyze it and understand what it's telling them from a newer diagnostic standpoint as a resource. And then that feeds right into the MyPath. And so with that same thing with the elementary this year, bringing it on board at both ELA and math, we had the same kind of training. And again, percentage wise, I don't have an exact percentage. Most of our teachers, and that's not hard data by any means, but most of our teachers across the board used it at varying levels. But in terms of the diagnostic, all experienced it, all used it, all looked at their student data. The MyPath is the place where we don't have all of the, the percentage in hand at this point. However, we're working with our iReady team right now to propose and have gone through this planning around a 3-year PD plan that's really extensive in terms of being able to do just what Dr. Sue was talking about, making sure that we own our data, that our administrators, as a part of those trainings, are on board and can also own that data alongside their teachers and understand this resource through and through, coupled with our math curriculum as well. So lots in play at this point. And then so percentage-wise, Director Bowman, great question. That's something we're going to hold ourselves accountable to in terms of expectations around this resource, and really, establish those expectations to fidelity to the use of this software, and then also the diagnostic and the results as well. So that's going to be an expectation on our part to really build that in. So all of our teams.
And to that end, Director Bowman, we leveraged ESSER dollars to buy 3-year contracts for both iReady Math and Reading with all the whistles and bells, so that teachers will have the complete set. And the reason you typically will buy something or go into a contract for 3 years is that if it turns out not to be a promising practice, then you are not, connected to it, in perpetuity, but you can make an adjustment to what the next tool might be. But I firmly believe this is, and it certainly is an allowable use relative to understanding and instructional gaps and potential impacts of the pandemic and addressing them in the short term, but also in the long term. And if I might just quickly go to the last slide, Patty, I did not get there. Not only to your question, Director Bowman, and then Chair Wolf, I know you had a question, that it is not just solely about professional development and building the capacity of the adults in the system, it's also giving them proximity to students. And so we are also leveraging ESSER dollars, and this is a timeline to demonstrate that with the ESSER dollars that we have, both ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, we can offer summer school this year and 3 more summers out that next year we will remain at a 190-day contract, and that we will be working with TTEA to establish an additional 5 days of instruction going forward in 22-23 and 23-24, or 23-24, so that collectively, if a student also participated in summer school, they would have the equivalent of 41 weeks of instruction out of 54. And so it is about time as well as expertise and capacity. Chair Wolf.
Thank you. And let me know if you all can't hear me. My internet continues to be unstable. So just a couple points. So as we look to further our commitment to iReady, I think at the next board meeting, it'd be great, Todd, if you brought a couple of teachers with you to kind of talk about how this functioned in their classroom as they did these assessments. And then that's what I guess, Dr. Sue, it seems like during the presentation, you talked about material assessments, and then it's also though instruction on how you differentiate. And so it's those combined pieces that will be in play. So that was just my comment or request as we look to the next meeting.
Yeah.
And again, I want to stress during the No Child Left Behind era, it was all focused on the teacher and the individual principal. Either you make things happen or we'll replace you. And I disagreed with that strategy then, and I disagree with that strategy now. It is about the efficacy of the entire system, both the school system and the culture that is an assessment literacy culture and an increasing intellectual curiosity. Why is this? And to see themselves as practitioners and diagnosticians that have the right tools to apply at the right time. But it is also about an efficacy at the district level. And it goes back to that coherence framework that I have shared with you many times. The instructional core is only as healthy as the whole system of supports. And so there is an accountability on the central office side to support the efficacy building and sustainability in the school on the school side. And so both of those have to be in play for us to be able to effectively and consistently get after the gaps that have been persistent.
So then I'm curious, using this tool to get down to the per student level and how is one specific student doing? Am I correct in my assumption that we can then have that information at student conferences so that parents can see the specific data on their student, how it is relative to the rest of the class? Because
Correct.
one of the things I love about this is how easy the graphs are to read. And so it seems to me that even if a parent can't make it to a student conference, if they're given these charts, they can kind of see how their kid is doing, in a fairly visually friendly manner that I really like.
Yeah. The other piece, and thank you for that, Director Zerschmidt, I would also share with you that one of the things that this district is now experiencing that other districts have is they have brought on new curriculum that is aligned to the current state standards. All of us were coming out of the Great Recession and could not invest in curriculum, and now are beginning to make those adjustments. Part of the challenges right now with the math data is the fact that those standards shifted down into lower grades. And the curriculum that we had prior to the iReady curriculum did not address that. And so it is no wonder that we see some students, 2+ years behind, because it's the standard has shifted. It isn't that the teacher has become less effective. It is the standard has shifted. The teacher is shifting with that. The iReady helps with that, but that's also part of the professional development. Now, all of a sudden, I never had to teach, particularly maybe at 4th grade, a certain set of algebraic formulas and thinking. Now I do. And so as a 4th grade teacher, I'm retooling myself so I can address that, which will help everybody else upline. But it is, as you are going through a standard shift, where that standard lands requires the teacher then to have to shift and rebuild their capacity relative to what they are now responsible for instructing. But that too should improve over time, particularly with these tools.
Yeah, and I would emphasize, and we'll talk more on the 10th at the board meeting as well when we talk about it, but the iReady coupled with EdGems, our new curriculum, and that all of that mapping has been happening, and the alignment to the standards that's so powerful with EdGems, the curriculum we adopted. And then this supplementing alongside that is just a powerful combination to really check our kids and then give them additional supports on an individual basis as needed. So good combination.
So I just had a couple of comments and questions. I just want to say thank you for the presentation, very informative. And I don't know, I'm super excited about this. This is super, super exciting. I guess it sounds like this is pretty transformational, really. I mean, I remember back at the last OSBA meeting, we were all together with Dr. Sue, and I can't remember a couple other administrators. And we were talking about assessments and kind of wanting kind of the outline about how they all lined up, informative and summative and, interim. And that was kind of one of our professional development as a board, is understanding all this. And I feel like now we kind of got majorly interrupted. I don't want to downplay that, but by COVID and everything. But I feel like we're kind of, starting to grab hold now and make progress in this area. But a couple of questions. One is, it seems like, the instructional tools and support, I just want to understand how predictive those are. You said research-based, but I know there's the art and there's the science. So if a teacher uses those tools and we're assuming that all other variables are stable, what are the chances of a student, making those leaps that are expected?
So Director Fox, what I would
Yes.
share with you on that is that iReady, because it is aligned to state standards, SBAC, the test items on SBAC are also aligned to state standards. And so they are a similar criteria. It's a criterion referenced assessment versus normed. So it says these are the things that we know are going to be tested upline on SBAC. And so we want to make sure that those same items or items like that are getting in front of the student to be instructed so that they can understand how the standard, unpacking the standard, develop the skills and knowledge and critical thinking that's responsible, and that they will be tested for upline. So I think that's the next piece, is us checking the validities that iReady, all of these companies will tell you we are predictive within a band relative to the state summative. And then it's our job to see, is that how our kids are experiencing it? For example, Stibbles made the claim that they had made the shift to Common Core or to the Oregon State standards. And we found that our kids were off by about 15%. And so we provided that feedback back to them saying, I think you've got some adjustment relative to some of the criterion that you are assessing that tells us our kids should be on grade level or should be at least a 3, if not a 4 on the SBAC, and yet they're coming in at a 2. And so that's some of the work that we have to do, work on consistently as we are rolling these out to kind of double check, is everything lining up with the summative assessment? But that's one of the reasons why this was selected, is that it should be predictive of how a student would perform.
Okay, and then the second piece to my question is, and I know we're running out of time, is the testing performance variance. So, we've talked about testing fatigue and different students have different capabilities in testing. Some test well, some don't test well. What do we know with iReady about testing? Is there variation across, races of students, genders of students? Any input on that, or can we maybe talk about?
I would defer to Katie and to Elise or to Todd if you have any insights relative to that.
Well, first and foremost, I'll just say this about iReady. They were very hesitant, in fact, told us no originally about having a test provided from a pandemic standpoint, provided at home and having kids take it home, just based on the validity of their test and what it might, how it might tweak their programming in general with the results. And we and other districts pushed on that and said, wait a minute, we need to be able to assess kids at home. So this year's home assessment, in one sense, it's going to be interesting to see once we get kids back in front of us, like we are now, what those results will look like in terms of being able to proctor that in school in a setting and that is, more structured in that sense. That's one thing. In terms of like the question around, the different groups and who tests and how and that kind of thing. I think that's something we're just simply going to need to learn in terms of what we get back in our own data. There are national kinds of trends and and data that iReady has for us. But I think, you know, we look at that in one sense with a grain of salt, and really want to focus on what we're doing in our own core and our own instruction, and then be able to look at, as we start to unfold this, really look at our own data that way, and start to make some program decisions based on what we're getting back that way. So there is data through iReady that is on a national level, disaggregated in that, but you know, and we've looked at it and we'll continue to, but we're excited to really get our hands on our own data and really see where that shapes up, because we can control that core instruction, those resources that we have in that. So that's what we're looking forward to.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to be mindful of time, but I also want to make sure we address any other questions or comments. Hearing none, I'm returning to you, Chair Wolf.
Yeah, and I think as we've all alluded to, we'll be readdressing this on May 10th. It is exciting. I do appreciate Director Fox's acknowledgement of the hard work to put this data and presentation together. So thank you all for that. And with that, we will adjourn recess for a dinner break and come back to our regular meeting at 6:30. Thank you all.
Patty, can you pause the live stream? Or
Yes.
can it be paused?
I can stop it.
I wonder. Or do you want to just put up, we can put up something that says,
I was gonna put up, I made a little sign.
that's great. Wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. If I can find my sign.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to do a quick check-in for those here for on the Zoom. Just at 6:29, so if people could pop on their video cameras so I can tell who's present, that would be very helpful. Thank you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sue, Tracy, Rowan. Dr. Ricky, gonna have my own
Yes.
audio drag.
Yes,
Good
you're
thing
right.
it's a short meeting. Would you like me to go ahead and get started? Do you think that's
That would be
appropriate? All
lovely.
board members are here present. Oh my word. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the April 26th regular board session for the Tigard-Tualatin School Board. We met earlier this evening at 5 p.m. to have a work session on a report on assessments, formative assessments. So this evening, we will continue in our regular session. Dr. Ricky Smith, are there any proposed changes to the agenda?
There are none, Chair.
Okay, this evening's consent agenda includes the March 19th special board work session, human resources report, February and March financial report, the bond financial report, and the City of Tualatin SRO IGA. With that, board members, are there any moves on the consent? If not, I will take a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I move to approve the agenda and consent agenda as presented.
So I will take Director Zertsmeet as the first and Director Emerson as the second. Motion was moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, we can just do a choral response. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries. And with that, we will move to recognition and good news. Director Rose and Lisa Burton.
Okay,
Thank
good.
you. I'll turn it over to Lisa.
Oh,
Go ahead, Lisa.
she did. Sorry. I think your name's on there too, Tracy. So good evening, everybody. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I have just a brief presentation for recognition and good news. Everybody see that okay? So to start this evening, I just wanted to say that when I started creating this presentation, I was really overwhelmed with really all the people across our district who have continued to provide support to our schools. I just was amazed, and principals shared and office staff shared kind of what's been happening across their schools. And it's pretty amazing despite everything that's happened. And Principal Velasquez, said our community is a huge part of what we do. And that's absolutely true. We could not do the work we do without all the people across our community who are helping us. So here's a little bit of data that was a little bit shocking to myself, and I think Tracy, when we talked about this, the numbers for the 2 years prior to COVID, and this is volunteer hours of people who are checking into our help desk system when they come and volunteer in our buildings and on our campuses. And it's just amazing, 70,000 plus hours. And then we went down to 44 with, stopping the year in March, or stopping attendance in the buildings in March last year. And then down to 1,000, just under 1,500 hours. And it really doesn't paint a picture of what's truly been happening across our district throughout this year and the end of last year, even though they're not checking in. As I started looking at all the things that people are doing across the district, they're still giving probably, if not the same amount of hours, more hours of their time and resources. As I was looking at what's been happening across our district, this is just a brief view of some of the things that are happening that I'm going to outline quickly in a few more slides. one of the greatest things I think our parent groups have done this year is they've created opportunities for students to do additional projects and things at home, and they've come together and put together kits that kids, parents could come by and grab at schools, especially our elementary schools, and just creating additional opportunities for learning. And I was just so impressed with all the schools that had parent groups doing this across the district. Also, virtual events. There were a lot of virtual events that happened across our district, and readathons and virtual book fairs that continued their fundraising, and after-school activities. Just amazing the amount of things, opportunities they provided to families and their students, although they, weren't in buildings, to connect online. There were groups at our schools as students were getting ready to come back that they went to the buildings, and this is an example at Bridgeport where they created a kind of a tool outside for kids with sidewalk chalk to do activities when they're during recess, and there were a lot of schools where parents came and provided these opportunities for safe play outside. PSOs continued, or parent groups continued with their fundraising, which those funds, directly come back and support school activities, support families in their school communities. And then they also were very creative in finding ways to create virtual yearbooks. So students would submit their photos from what they were doing in their homes, or maybe their screenshots of them being in class, and the parent groups put together these amazing yearbooks. And then, of course, garden work continued. We have schools that have these amazing gardens, and parents and community members. We have a lot of community members who volunteer in our gardens. And they continue to make sure that those garden spaces were kept up. And they were beautiful places for learning as our students came back, but then also created a place for people to come and be outside and continue supporting the garden work. And then for high schools, I think it's probably been the toughest for volunteers to really find a way to support. But we have our parent groups who have continued to plan for graduation and support our staff and support students as they're getting ready for graduation, and providing the resources they need to have a wonderful graduation ceremony. One thing that I was really impressed with our a lot of our schools is beginning their No Place for Hate programs, and that parents have been a really big part of that. So at Alberta Writer, the parents have been promoting the program. They've been, asking parents to also participate in the program. And another school was Bridgeport, who also started their program, and parents have been a really big part of volunteering and helping make sure that this program that they're adding to the school is made, that the community is aware of it. And so promoting it on their own platforms and promoting it in the community and sharing with other parents about what's happening. And then we can never forget our community partners, our faith-based community partners, who, this is just one example at Templeton Elementary, who have continued to provide support to the schools, purchasing supplies that they need, providing food to families, providing encouragement and support to staff as they're coming back into the buildings. And this is just one list of many faith-based partners across our district who are supporting our schools. And then we can't forget Packed with Pride. I would say Packed with Pride probably has the largest pool of volunteers across our district, across our community, staff members, community members, parents who are giving their time and their resources every single week to provide, over 800 boxes of food to families. And so they've continued this. They found a way to continue to find resources and financial support, and that, comes from our community. And so we just are so grateful for our Pack with Pride volunteers who now, over a year have been providing this resource to our families. And then last but not least, we have volunteer coaches across our district who have jumped in as, we're getting back into activities. And that is not just athletic activities. It includes, our band programs and our arts programs, and parents have always been involved. Our parents and our community have always been involved in those activities, providing support, providing resources. It looks very different this year, but no one has stopped. No one has stopped volunteering. And I've just been so amazed at that continued support. And a lot of our schools sent in very specific names of people that we are going to be recognizing and as during this month of volunteer appreciation. But this is just a little bit I wanted to share with you of everything that's been happening across our district. Did you have anything to add, Tracy?
No, that was great, Lisa. Thank you. This is just part of April is National Volunteer Month. We thought it would be very appropriate because we continue to hear about how creative the volunteers are being in each of our buildings and the things that go on that we don't even know about unless we do something like this. So we wanted to give the opportunity not only to shine the light on the work that they're doing, but also we know that we have an audience this evening. So we'll turn it over to all of you to be able to share a few words relative to all the work that's being put in and all the support of our schools.
Tracy and Lisa, thank you. I think it makes us all realize that the work and the spirit continues. There's just not a computer that we're all logging into to track that data, but such an impressive video. And so really appreciate that board members.
So I would just like to add my thanks to all of the volunteers. And I had the pleasure last week to volunteer with Packed with Pride for my first shift. Now that I'm fully vaccinated, I was able to get inside a building and do some work with people. And it was so much fun. And I would encourage anybody who's watching this, who maybe hasn't volunteered with Packed with Pride, they're still looking for volunteers. And it's fun work. It's a good workout. I was sweating by the end of it, loading up boxes of food, but it was so soul satisfying to be helping people and knowing that I was helping people get food in these trying times. So I just wanted to give a special shout out to Packed with Pride.
And along those lines, I'll just give a special shout out to Made Fast, who's the volunteer coordinator for the foundation and for, I think, de facto Packed with Pride. So if you're friends with her on Facebook, you know that she is using all of her webs into the community to try to get folks to volunteer for slots, and I think is responsible for, when you think of all the people she's brought in alongside Margie, herself, tens of thousands of volunteer hours. So special shout out to Made and all the folks who volunteer. Thank you.
Definitely. Made's email just came out an hour ago. But looking at the variety of things that have been going on, I think what really caught my eye, I knew that everybody was being creative, trying to figure out like plan B, but to see the things that weren't like anything we used to do, kind of quote unquote, all those STEM kits going home, I just thought that was brilliant and wonderful, and what a great way to try to keep the kids engaged with something hands-on. So thank you to everyone who has been so creative all year long to show appreciation and keep things going and creating community. It's a lot of work, but it's wonderful.
I just want to echo everything that's been said, and just say that, you know, that's part of what makes our district so wonderful is all the people who do volunteer, whether it be coaches, Pack of Pride, classroom volunteers, PTO. It's always been a point of pride about our community. And I also want to say it's fun to volunteer. You know, it's a great way to connect with people. I've made some great friendships and gotten to know students and teachers and staff through volunteering. So it's for anybody who's looking for opportunities, it's a great way to connect and make friends as well. So thank you, everybody.
Yeah, I keep thinking about the COVID yearbook. I may have to walk away for a year and then come back and reflect. But I love that that happened and to capture such a unique time in our lives. So thank you again with that. And we will move to student representative reports. Emily is unable to join us this evening from ASB commitments, and I have asked Sharon to share her report, and then Rowan, I'll have you wrap up for us with student rep reports. Thanks, Sharon.
Thanks, Chair Wolf. If Rowan wouldn't mind going first, I've got to pull it up for a minute. So Rowan, I don't want to put you on the spot, but please.
No, that's okay. Yeah, so we started a new quarter last Monday, and that means that grades are just now being transcripted, as that was the end of the last transcripted grade period. And we also started hybrid last Monday. And so I think 9th and 10th graders were able to go back to school for 2 days. 11th and 12th graders were back for 1 day, just so we could have that orientation time. And so now we're on the regular hybrid schedule, Monday and Tuesday, and then Thursday and Friday, depending on your cohort. So that's great. There have been, like, I guess it's just how it is. Just low number of students, at least in my classes. I had like 3 to 5 total hybrid kids, which is kind of weird, but it's as good as we're going to get, and it's still great just to be with the teachers. So that was great. And then the only other thing I know of is, at least for Tigard, we got some info on our graduation. They said that we're going to have both a drive-through time for us to get our diplomas, but then also a student-only ceremony without family members, so that we can have students and staff give speeches in the stadium, which I think is great. And that's all I have.
All right, so I'm giving Emily's report from Tualatin High School. And she starts out by saying that both hybrid and online students found last week's transition smooth and easy. They appreciate all of the hard work of the district and building administration, teachers, classified staff that have put into the planning and implementation of the hybrid model. We started the fourth quarter, had no school on Wednesday, April 21st because of teacher workday. Forecasting for the next school year closed on Friday, April 23rd. Students were asked to fill out a Google form, though they can still contact counselors if changes need to be made afterwards. ASB held their second ever Bob Ross painting night on Friday from 7 to 8 through Google Meets. A link was sent out to the whole student body. And lastly, more and more students have been receiving vaccinations. That completes her report.
Thank you, Sharon, and thank you, Rowan. Any questions for Rowan? Okay. No, it's great news. I'm excited for graduation. My goodness, Rowan, that's going to be here in a heartbeat for you guys. But appreciate the hard work that's happened to try to find a way for you to all celebrate together and celebrate with family. And glad to hear that transition back is working. So
I actually have one quick question for Rowan. I was slow to find my unmute button. So Emily mentioned that some students were getting vaccinated. I'm just wondering, Rowan, if you've heard of any of that happening at Tigard as well.
Yeah, I don't get to talk with a ton of people, but of the people I have talked to, everybody's trying to get vaccines, and I think that people have been successful in that. I will be getting mine very soon as well. And my sister got hers, I think, this morning. So yeah, it's good.
That is wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Zerchman. An important question. And so if there are no other comments, we are rapidly moving through the agenda this evening. We will move to Superintendent and Board Communication and start with Dr. Ricky Smith.
Thank you, Chair Wolf. 3 items for the board this evening regarding why our collective district work matters for students. With permission from Henry Taylor Golby, who is a junior at Tigard High School, I want to share his recent email to Director Unn asking for her guidance. Henry writes, I first learned about the impacts and goals of affinity groups from the budget work presentation. I remember leaving the meeting that night as thoughts about affinity groups, their purposes, and effects resonated with me. I believe that these groups are important for the individuals that participate in them and to our community as a whole. I also believe that they can create real-world change and help student advocate for things their community experiences that our larger community isn't aware of. After taking a few days to process my thoughts, I came up with an idea to create a rare disease advocacy club at Tigard. I want the club to reflect many of the affinity group goals and effects. And as the Director of Equity and Inclusion, I figured talking to you about my idea made the most sense. I'm wondering if you would be willing to discuss my idea with me and give me guidance. Henry is a great example of why community process and student voice matters. Many thanks, Henry, for your email, and I have no doubt that Director Unn has already reached out to you and is helping you plan your next steps. So we look forward to hearing how your work goes forward. Regarding why our community partnerships matter, I received a thank you note from the City of Tualatin City Manager Sherilyn Lombos and Maintenance Services Manager Clay Reynolds that reads, Dear Dr. Sue, as you know, Tualatin neighborhoods were especially hard hit by the winter storm that occurred over Valentine's Day weekend. We were able to clear roadways and neighborhoods of debris quickly, in no small part thanks to your assistance and loan of the Tualatin High School South parking lot for debris drop-off. We really appreciate your partnership. Please pass along our thanks to your team. So you've all been thanked. And then lastly, I would end with an update regarding the current COVID metrics for Washington County and impacts for district operations. During today's Washington County Superintendent's meeting, Washington County Public Health provided the following information. 1, Washington County case counts are expected to exceed 200 per 100,000 mark, and Washington County hospitalizations are on track to exceed the 300 mark, which will trigger a return to extreme high-risk county designation. It is expected that the governor will make that announcement this week. 2, all presumed and confirmed positive school COVID cases and cohort exposures must now quarantine for 14 days, no exceptions. 3, based on county risk guidance and ODE Ready Schools Safe Learners guidance, TTSD will continue with the following. A, hybrid instruction modeled as designed unless unable to contain viral transmissions in the school throughout the end of the year, which would trigger a return to CDL. And currently we have had no difficulty controlling and maintaining positive cases and quarantining cohorts. Washington County Public Health stated that while the CDC allows up to 3 feet for social distancing, due to the significant efficacy of the British variant transmissibility, they recommend staying with current student-staff classroom ratios during this period of high viral transmission in the general public, in addition to adhering to wearing masks and hand sanitation. And last, indoor and outdoor contact sports will continue. Spectator limits will adjust to the county's designation. This includes all outdoor gatherings per the county risk guidance document. That ends my communication to the board.
Thank you, Dr. Sue. Expected, still disappointing, but thank you very much. Board members, anything to share this evening?
I've got a couple things. First, I also just got my first COVID shot last week. So like Jill, I'm very excited to get that second one and encourage anyone listening who hasn't signed up yet to get on the list and get moving. A couple of other things. First, I'm going to forward an email to Patty to be included in the minutes of this meeting about pay to play fees. I was thinking after our last community budget meeting about pay to play fees and the approach of universal, I forget, Dr. Sue, the educational term, but it's like universal design versus means tested. And I wasn't able to send it to all board members because public meeting law. So I wanted to surface it here so you all could review in your sort of budget committee capacity, but also as board members. And I wanted to just sort of read into the record an excerpt from an email from former Superintendent Randy Shield of Tillamook about the impact of pay to play when it was eliminated in Tillamook in 15-16. By eliminating pay to play fees, we realized a 34% increase in the number of students who turned out for sports. It's important to realize that prior to that, we never turned a student away because they couldn't pay. We had a scholarship or work programs, but in most cases, they just chose not to turn out. And Tillamook's fee at the time was only $75, which is 3 times less than ours. So just wanted to elevate that because I know we're in the middle of budget season and people are starting to think about what it's going to look like. And then the second thing I don't want to have a big discussion about this, but I'm becoming increasingly worried about the state school fund number, as I know a lot of budget watchers are. And the co-chairs, as Maureen shared with me, and I'm sure you all saw the OSBA press release, the co-chairs took an extraordinary step to not allow school board members to provide testimony at their Ways and Means Roadshow. And in the OSBA article at the end, one of the co-chairs said, "Oh, but we're very accessible to school board members." And so I'm wondering if we as a board should consider a resolution or requesting a meeting with the co-chairs, or I sort of felt as though if we're not able to provide this testimony in a public context, then we need to figure out how to still provide the advocacy, because I think we've shared, David, those numbers publicly about how disastrous the 9.1 or even a 9.3 budget would be for TTSD in terms of layoffs and school days cut. So just sort of wanted to enter that into the board's awareness, and perhaps we can coordinate if a colleague wants to do a resolution, or I don't know, Dr. Sue, if you have guidance on perhaps trying to set up some meetings, but I sort of felt like the challenge was laid down to school board members to answer the call. And I think we're all probably ready to do that.
Certainly. And Director Bowman, thank you. That's for the board's conversation. Just as a reminder, while I was not able to, I was cut from the list to do verbal testimony, as we're all superintendents, along the same lines as board members. We did file written testimony, and that might be a starting place, in terms of board advocacy, in addition to the advocacy document that Director Rose has produced for you, so that there is additional. We are more than happy to work on setting up meetings either with staff and or possible with legislators virtually. So we just need to know what your desire is, and we can support you in that way.
Maureen, I'm kind of curious about your thoughts from the OSBA perspective on what the best approach might be.
Well, I will say that, as you all would imagine, Director Lori Sattenspiel, for head of legislative services for OSBA, is really targeting different town halls, right? So if we're not able to participate in the Joint Ways and Means Roadshow, try to get on and testify at town halls. So that's something to be looking at, particularly with OSBA hat on, looking at Washington County. But Director Bowman, I think the idea of a resolution, I think that's a fantastic idea. I think we can leverage language that Dr. Sue used in her letter and testimony. I'm just thinking the school board pace, if that would require a draft and then a kind of a quick work session for us to comment and approve, but that would be, for the remaining 3 of you who have not commented, if that's something of interest, or a letter on behalf of the board that, I can sign, Ben and I can sign, but I think the resolution is powerful and happy to, move that forward. So I'll leave the three of you to give feedback on that.
So I have also submitted testimony. I worked with David to get some language. So I did it on the same day that our roadshow day was. So I did, but I'd be happy if you think that it would be helpful to do something further. I'm happy.
I agree. I think a resolution is a fantastic idea. And I would go so far as to say if the chair and vice chair would put in the effort to make a draft that we can then look at and do a first read, second read at the same time, and so pass the same evening. I don't think we have to have a first and second read on a resolution. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it as I'm saying it, we usually just have a resolution, but if we can edit the resolution that you guys have drafted and then pass it so that we can get it out to the state legislators as quickly as possible. Because yeah, when I heard that they were not allowing testimony, I felt particularly horrified. Like, what happened to our First Amendment rights?
My only concern is waiting till the May 10th. So that's why I was trying to think to escalate timelines. But Director Emerson.
Yeah, to that point, I was thinking that the more the better, right? So getting a letter out as soon as possible in case they are going to take action sooner than later. But in addition to the resolution on May 10, and I agree with Director Zerschmied that I am sure we could get it approved that night for time reasons. So, yeah.
Chair Wolf, one other point for consideration. Director Moore, it was my understanding from a legislative call last week with COSA that the next revenue forecast or update was coming to the legislature on the 19th of May. Is that correct?
Yes, Dr. Riki Smith, I believe. I knew it was sometime in May during that week. I didn't know the exact day. But
so my next question to you then is typically they won't finalize a budget before that revenue forecast. So, but who knows? This year has been amazing in a lot of different ways. So any sense of that?
Yeah, what I've heard, we can expect this to go on into the summer, at least June, before a budget's finalized. So I think we do have some runway time to get more advocacy out there.
That was the purpose of my question for the board, was to say that while I understand you're feeling some of that pressure, it may be that taking a little more time with your resolution and thoughts, that it may be then not just a one punch, but a several several opportunity punch along the way in preparation for that forecast on the 19th.
That sounds great to me, and I'm happy to work with Maureen on drafting a resolution. And I'm thinking too, if we've got that extended runway, we can pass it and then circulate with our school board colleagues and try to get some other districts aligned to key budget committee member votes to similarly elevate the school's budget where they live.
Yep, you're reading my mind that sometimes again, and it would be something probably across even the TriMet area. I mean, you could certainly serve that up via the ESDs.
All right, well, I will get to work on that, and that's it for my report.
Thank you, Vice Chair Bowman. I think it's a great idea. And then in the meantime, as Sharon has already done, I think there's no reason to not send that email to our legislative delegation and just continue to nudge on some of those issues while we get a resolution prepared. So great idea. Anything from additional thoughts from board members?
So I had the opportunity at the end of last week to, or actually not last week, the week before, to go visit all of our secondary schools with Dr. Riki Smith to see their preparations for reopening in hybrid. And I was so impressed by the safety measures at every single one of the middle schools and high schools, how the principals and their staff had put together specific plans for how to get students into and out of the building with the minimum of contact with other students. Is really impressive, the lengths to which staff is going to make sure that those students are staying safe as they're coming back into hybrid. Also, it was my first time being able to go inside the brand new Tualatin Middle School. And I don't know if I'm the last board member to have gone in, but holy cow, it's beautiful. It's got to be one of the most gorgeous buildings I've ever stepped foot in. And so it just reminded me to say thank you to the bond committee who's been overseeing that, and thank you to all of our voters who gave us the money to build that, and all of our schools that we've done with that bond. But and the improvements to Tigard High School are, the new cafeteria is just stunning. I mean, I know the kids got to see it this week, but wow, what an amazing new building they've gotten there too. So that's my communication for the week.
Well, I have an update about the bias incident and hate speech oversight committee. Drum roll, please. We did, the last time I gave an update, we did not have any student applications. So that's why we were delaying it a little bit to get those. We did receive student applications, so that is wonderful. And now the fun of trying to schedule time in the spring for a group to get together to be able to interview all of the applicants. Working very, very, very hard. I think we have a window so that next time we meet, we might even be able to share names. So thank you for your patience and your good wishes for open windows.
I just have a quick thing to add. Thanks, Karen, for the update. And thanks, Jill, for volunteering for that. But I guess I'm back in the running since it was delayed till next week. So thanks for offering to help. I just want to give a quick update. Director Unn and myself have been, and Spencer Lewis from OSB, have been kind of working on trying to review our student organization policy. And so it's been a real pleasure to work with her as she's forming the affinity and alliance groups to see kind of how that aligns with it does or doesn't align with our student organization policy. So that's been a work in progress. She's been so busy and it's been hard to get schedules together, but I just want to give you an update that we are working on that. And then we'll have to figure out what's next after we I know we have a policy committee, our meeting on Wednesday. So I'm hoping to have maybe an update if she has time to review some of the stuff I sent her today.
So I will close that up, and again, let me know if I start to be unable to communicate. I thought I had my internet issue fixed during the break, but I'm not certain about that. So I just wanted to do things quickly. The first one, financial oversight, had a committee member leave and would love to have folks apply for that open position. The link to that is on the news. You can either go to the business office page on our website, or it's also listed under news, and you can click on the link to get to the application. The committee only meets typically twice or 3 times a year, but it does ask that those, like the Bond Oversight Committee, have that technical professional skill set in finance and accounting, or in that capacity, just like we had asked for our oversight committees in construction and finance and design and architectural planning and all things great about bonds, which made Jill knocked off her shoes from being overwhelmed with quality. The second piece is I want to do an update on the policy process. So from where we went from April 19th, I took all the feedback again, did a draft, and as I had mentioned at our work session, Ben then reviewed that. We've got a draft. I don't know, I'm going to start over, I think, and call it draft 1. But at this point, given that as a board, we have to gather and process this, I have actually handed it off to Zinnia. And our strategy is between now and May 5th, Zinnia is actually doing outreach, several community feedback groups with allies group, family circle group, staff affinity groups, and some student groups to gather feedback and kind of do one more round. From there, my hope is to bring it back to the May 10th board meeting, which would be this next round for board members to give feedback and to look at it at that point. I'm trying to minimize the number of different times people are giving feedback at the same time to try to streamline this process. So from there, we will take that piece, and then I'm really offering it up to board members to go out individually, get feedback, hope to have the Tigard-Tualatin Student Union at that point give us feedback as well. And then Dr. Riki Smith and her team will work, Director Rose and I chatted about that this afternoon, with principals to ensure that PSOs are getting feedback, and then also again through their staff, and through that certainly connect with our teachers and classified unions. So it's a different strategy than I think the process that Ben led through EASH, but what I'm feeling confident about is our goal to pass an equity policy by the end of the year and ensure that those really connecting to the policy are having an opportunity to give feedback. So we really are trying to do this through multiple avenues. So we will come back through all those processes and look at May 24th as what we'll call the official first read on the policy. But I want to assure fellow board members that there's one more time that you all will look at this with half of community input and then another round. So I hope that makes sense. And I'll take any questions, or and if you have any comments, please feel free to add.
Thanks, Chair Wolf and Vice Chair Bowman. I just have a quick question around, are we going to see a draft anytime soon? So I know it's going to go out to the affinity groups to Director Unn, but is the board going to see, and also is it going to be available to the broader community, or are we going to wait till the May 24th meeting?
No, I'm sorry if that wasn't clear, Director Fox, May 10th. So what I'm trying to eliminate is to have one more round with all the board members, send that to Director Unn. So Zinnia is working on that right now, and I'll bring that back May 10th. So. And again, I apologize. I'm just sharing, you were breaking up, so I just shut my camera off. Any other questions? Okay. All right. So if that is it, we will move. Patty, did we have public comment this evening?
Before we move on to public comment, there was one question related to COVID that I wanted to follow up with Dr. Sue and her team before we move on, if that's all right.
Oh, that's great, Ben.
I was just gonna, you gave us the update on quarantines and positive IDs last week. Have there been additional ones or any evidence of spread across cohorts or within a cohort?
So no spread across cohort. We have now, as our middle and senior students are coming in, we are now seeing a similar pattern that we saw in the elementary, which is community being exposed and bringing it indoors into the school community. And so this morning there were 2 reports, and again worked the same process. Both, again, I can say nothing but, major kudos to Tracy, Director Rose, and to Director Kinch in terms of the way in which they handled that along with our nurses. Director Rose has an up close and personal relationship with both Washington County and Clackamas County Public Health. But the fact of the matter is we have been able to limit transmission. And so again, that is the reason why you heard me say this evening that even in extreme high risk, we will continue to follow the RSL guidance, which basically says unless you are unable to control transmission, you are to continue in hybrid, and so we will. I think our community continues to, and I know that this is challenging because we are well past being fatigued relative to surge and then drops and then surge again. But the fact of the matter is, the higher the level of the disease, the higher the likelihood and the greater the likelihood that it will come into the schools. And the challenge is for those who wish to be in hybrid, that when there is a positive or presumed positive within their cohort, everyone must quarantine except for those that are vaccinated. And that is what we're trying to avoid. And unfortunately, we are also seeing of the hospitalizations now in Washington County, and this is the trend nationally, these are young individuals, 20 and 30-year-olds and younger than that, that the British variant is now not only highly transmissible, which we knew, but clearly has a foothold and unfortunately is now creating hospitalizations in a much younger cohort than we have previously seen with other variants.
I just want to ask a clarifying question. I think I heard you say that if a student is vaccinated and their cohort would otherwise be quarantined, that if they're vaccinated, that student does not need to quarantine?
I'm looking at everyone still needs to quarantine.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Director Kinch.
No, if the student is vaccinated, fully vaccinated, 14 days after their second, they do not need to quarantine.
Correct.
Okay.
So and that is the reason why, again, I've said this many times, but I wish to again reaffirm the support that the board provided relative to us making sure that our staff had access to vaccination prior to returning. And so again, we're trying to minimize the disruption to instruction for those who wish to be in hybrid. Again, I appreciate the question, Director Bowman, because it's just, sadly, it is a simple math problem. The higher the level of disease in the community, the more likely, the greater the likelihood it's coming into the schools. This afternoon, also Washington Public Health also affirmed the fact that many of our community sports clubs are being impacted as well. And so we've already had a situation in one of our schools where a number of students who participated in that particular club came into the schools. And so there was some fairly heavy duty tracing and cohort quarantine because of that impact. And it's just the nature, it's not making a statement one way or another, it's just the nature of the disease and the potential exposure.
Great follow-up, thank you. Patty let me know that we have no public comment this evening. So we will move from public comment to reports and discussion. We have one item this morning. We want to welcome Michael Delurba here this evening to discuss LIFT. Thank you, Michael.
Hi there. I'm just going to bring our other panelists on because they were prepared to come in at 7:45. So just give me 1 minute here. Sending the text now. And I will start and then we'll jump in as they come on here.
Who knew we'd be almost a half an hour ahead of schedule?
It's so unlike us.
I took your exhortation to heart, Chair Wolf.
Okay, so while they are signing on here, if we wouldn't mind beginning the presentation, I can kind of start on the first few slides and then they will join us as they sign in. Joining us tonight will be John Biles, who is a juvenile counselor with Washington County Juvenile and also a big figure throughout TTSD and working with our students, specifically our Tier 3 students in this program. Also joining us tonight will be Carrie Samuelson, who is in her second year teaching in our program and has been an integral part of expanding the program. And also joining us tonight will be a little bit at the end of the presentation will be Carrie Thomas, who is a parent who's been working along with the LIFT team this year. And then also Brian is joining in as LIFT is also a part of Tigard High School, obviously in a little bit of different implementation level, but he may chime in on a few parts, especially at the end here of the presentation. So I'll go ahead and start, and hopefully John will see my text soon and jump on for his slides. If not, I'll be ready to talk through his slides when he comes in. So as you all know, LIFT stands for Leadership Integrity for Today and Tomorrow. And our goal tonight is just to give you an update of where the pilot program is. And what's unique about this program is we have a memorandum of understanding with Washington County juvenile for this program. And so it's supported in a lot of different ways. And I'll talk about that piece, those pieces as they come in. Next slide, please. So LIFT, it started as a pilot program in June 2018. It was an idea that we spitballed in what was then the Student Affairs Office at Tualatin High School with myself and Kim Holden and John Biles and Brian Miller from Tualatin PD. And we started talking about wanting to have a different program in place. And John began telling us about a program he had developed in Washington County with Hillsborough School District. And when it had lost grant funding, that program kind of fell apart, but it had real good bones. And so we talked about how do we expand, what might we do to support our students who are really struggling. So our dream began re-engaging students through community mobilization, partnerships with the juvenile agency and growing list of partners, as well as relationship building, introducing students to more pro-social interaction and development, and the generation of opportunities, the deconstruction of the school to prison pipeline at our two comprehensive high schools. Next slide, please. So how is LIFT framed? We really tried to build LIFT through a restorative lens and anchoring in social justice. And I think the last time I presented the board, we spoke about how we began this program. This program began out of looking at attendance data and interviewing students and asking them why they didn't want to come to school. And we kind of backward designed the program from there. So outside of trying to listen to students, we looked at our own system and said, where do we need to have, where is there an opportunity to disrupt some patterns here that have pushed our kids out of school and have pushed them into making choices in the community that are not, helpful for them on a successful, positive trajectory to a post-secondary plan. And so we started, building the program, and we'll talk about some of those elements. We'll talk about the academic program. We'll talk about building a trauma-informed classroom. We'll talk about the sort of staffing that takes. We'll talk about the outside opportunities they have. We'll talk about bringing in interns in social work and having them work closely with Washington County Juvenile, learning how to intensive case manage students. And really the goal, though, is to provide really restorative relationships that then spread throughout the building. One of my best memories from the last 2 months has been having a conversation with Carrie Samuelson, who's our teacher. I'm not sure if she's on yet, about an interaction with a science teacher. And they got the kids to come in on a Thursday that students didn't have school, and they were working through assignments, and this teacher was popping in and out during Lippy, and just building that relationship and our students in that program at that time, just a few weeks ago, feeling very supported and loved. So as you can see, our aim here is here's our premise, that if students can feel safe and connected while they're in our school, if they can voice that they no longer feel targeted by discipline policies, if they can name an adult they believe cares about them, then they can access more academic, pro-social, and leadership-based achievement opportunities while they embark on a strong post-secondary plan. So knowing that we anchor our program in improvement science is, I think, an important thing to think about as we move forward. Next slide, please. Through the collaborative effort, here's some things that students are provided with. I'll talk about these first two, especially the JCP, a bit later when we get to defining what those scores mean. But in our collaboration with Washington County Juvenile, JCP is an assessment they've used a long time to quantify risk-taking behaviors. And when they build an intensive case management support plan for a student, the idea is to reassess them every 3 months or so and watch those risk factor scores drop. And so in our partnership with Washington County, through many discussions and MOU building, we were able to have them share that assessment with us. We went through a training where some of our administrators and teachers were trained to give that same assessment. And we've collected some data that I think is really compelling that we'll talk about in a few minutes here. They also get access to academic and developmental work, drug and alcohol use work. The Burst 2 is actually a protective factor assessment, and John can talk more about that. While they're getting education, that's the prevention side. So we've added 3 classes, which we'll talk about in a few minutes here. And then we build in pro-social activities. We're starting to plan a very robust summer experience for kids in the program. And then of course, connections, strong mentorship, the addition of interns through George Fox University and Portland State University, and along with our staff that are in-house, is just a phenomenal, they do a phenomenal job of building those relationships and connections, which we rely on constantly when supporting students. So I'm not sure if Carrie and John have joined us yet. I'm scrolling through my peeps here. Are either one of them signed in yet? If not, I can move on. Great, John's here. I'm not sure, is Carrie with us, John?
I sent both Carries a text message saying we started early.
Yep. Okay. So John, why don't you talk a little bit about the courses, or I can do that too. Next slide, please.
Yeah, I can. So SRT is a curriculum that we started early on in the pilot program. We wanted to have a curriculum that was focused on more cognitive behavioral therapy, teaching more of the social responsibility aspects of kids' lives. I had actually taught this class in the Hillsborough School District to a lot of high-risk students when we had the Safe Schools, Healthy Students grant. So I had a lot of experience with the curriculum. Tigard-Tualatin School District developed it into the LIFT program. It's more of like, the fundamentals of integrity, teaching the kids honesty and trust. And then as they go through the stages of change, pre-contemplation and contemplation, it's kind of like a curriculum trying to gradually get them to a point where they're developing those stages of change. It's more of a peer circle. It's developing more of a peer culture where the kids are kind of like confronting others in a constructive way and giving each other constructive and positive feedback. It's very trauma informed. It's talking about the kids' past, having them self-reflect. But as they're doing that, we're teaching them the skills of how to do that and overcome those past traumas.
Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you.
The wellness class was developed because the first year that we were teaching SRT, a lot of the students we were teaching at that time were juniors and seniors, and we did kind of a survey on all the students that were part of LIFT. And one thing that they said that they struggled with the most was coming to school and feeling in a state of mind that they felt safe and comfortable and energized to maintain themselves throughout the entire day. So this wellness class was advocated by the students, which we developed more of like the psychological aspects of being well to yourself, teaching relaxation, breathing techniques, how to control yourself when frustrated, anger management, tools to use to calm yourself down, meditation, and stuff like that.
And actually, that's a course that's now approved for health credit. Can we go a few slides forward to the leadership course, please? One more. Thank you.
So the leadership class is a new class that we have been talking about with our students as they've kind of like the stages of change. So they're pre-contemplation in the SRT, maybe in the wellness, they start to make that transition, they start to improve on their grades, they start attending more regularly. We wanted to give these kids an opportunity to give back, because I believe that, if you have had some troubles in the past, but by making the significant change in your life, you give back to the community and you build your confidence. Well, that's what this leadership class is all about. We're trying to build their confidence, but give them an opportunity to have a voice in their community and give back. And the first semester is all about teaching the skills of leadership. And then the second semester, our goal was to have them become mentors to the middle school students. and giving back and teaching those kids what not to do, teaching them how to make right decisions. Also, there's been a lot of conversations about doing public speaking, talking to the parents, the struggles that some of these students, these marginalized students that have a hard time being in school, what they need from their parents, what they need from their community to be safe and successful. We are working with the county commissioner, which has invited us when we get back to normalcy to have some of these students be on the county commissioner board, to have a voice. The county commissioner wants to hear from these student voices. And so this is an avenue where we can take this leadership class and give these kids those opportunities.
And as Carrie was building the curriculum for this class, she met with our ASB, one of our ASB teachers, Eric Wadsworth, and really looked at what was taught in character and leadership and some crossover between those two courses to help give students another inlet in. And so we look to provide leadership opportunities in all kinds of ways. So they've spoken in churches, they've spoken at community events, they've actually spoken to this board several times. They've spoken in school settings and to staff, and they've presented. So that the idea is you give them opportunities to lead through that work, that they get a chance to show off that growth, which has been, I think, really powerful. Next slide, please. So when we look at who was served in LIFT this year, 40 students are being served directly within the pandemic. 99% of those students are from historically underserved communities. 3 of them are current 9th graders, 19 are current 10th graders, 13 are current 11th graders, and 4 are current seniors, 1 of which has already graduated. In the last year, we really focused on 9th graders. And if you look at the balance, why so many 10th graders, we shifted our program focus last year to really supporting more 9th graders in the 9th grade class that we had last year. And those students have stayed pretty consistent in the program. 16 students are currently under formal supervision with Washington County Juvenile out of those being served, and 24 students are not. So we're gonna look at some patterns between those 2 different groups of students here in just a few slides. So in a moment, we're gonna talk about our outcomes. And so really we're gonna look, next slide, please, sorry. What I want to refer back to is the JCP assessment that I spoke of earlier, that we have partnered with Washington County Juvenile to use. This is the same assessment they use internally. And so we're using some data now that goes back a few years. And but we're going to really focus on this year's group of 40 to kind of compare 2 different profiles. Those that have entered LIFT as a part of their work with Washington County, and then those who enter a program that have not been involved in any formal supervision or any kind of criminal charges. We want to compare how those students are being served in the system. So, but we will say in general that overall, we've seen JCP scores drop for students in the program, and that's been consistent every single year. Why? They get education about the impact of drugs and addiction. They are wrapped with support that's trauma-informed and intensive. They engage in pro-social activities to help each other, not just participate in positive ways, but also to hold each other accountable. A big piece of us developing this program with historically marginalized groups in mind is really engaging those collective assets that are a strong part of their culture, and helping them to be accountable with each other. That's part of where integrity comes into the fold in the name. A positive connection to adults and peers, and involved in treatment and counseling, and then also increased in parent involvement, which hopefully Carrie Thomas will be able to join us tonight and talk a little bit about that piece.
You might want to
Next
check
slide, please.
She's here. Is she here yet?
I'll look while you're talking, John. So I'm going to have John talk a little bit about what we've learned in the JCP scores. So John last week kind of shared a spreadsheet with me, and we did an analysis of how our students have done after an initial screen, after a second screening, and after a third screening. You'll see in that sample size that the initial screen is 16 students, the secondary screen is 10 students, and the third screen is 3 students. That might be when they were taken to the program. It just might mean that they haven't had, their time hasn't come up yet for the next screening, or they've transitioned to a different program. So you'll see some number differences in the data and why they haven't gone through multiple screenings. But John could talk a little bit about what he's seen for students that are entering LIFT while a part of their formal supervision. So they may be on probation, they may have charges filed against them, they may be waiting those processes to happen, and what John saw in the data there.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. So the JCP stands for Juvenile Crime Prevention. It is an evidence-based assessment tool that has been used by the state of Oregon and other states throughout the country. Washington County has been using this for years. It has been proven to show where we need to concentrate the most focus in trying to accommodate a lot of our client needs. JCP is broken down into risk domains, which is school issues, peer relationship and other relationships, behavior issues, family functioning, substance use, attitude, values, and beliefs, and mental health. So LIFT basically does a JCP when a student comes into the LIFT program. We do a thorough assessment and kind of try to do what we call as a biopsychosocial, which kind of breaks down all these things to give us a clear understanding of the past issues and the current issues. And a lot of that information comes from the JCP. And we have been trying to do reassessments every 3 months, but unfortunately, because of our current pandemic, that's been pretty hard, because when we do a JCP, we want the student to be present. And we like to involve the parents too, as we all know students are not always honest. But some intriguing data that I got compared from the formal supervision to the students that have never been referred to the juvenile department. 31% of those kids that are formal probation ended up going to a correctional setting. That means like they went to McLaren. That to me was concerning. And then 31% went to Creekside. So a lot of these kids that have committed 1, 2, 3 crimes and have had pretty extensive time within the juvenile department, I saw that through this data that not only do they have the pressure of going to school, they have the pressure of the courts, and they have all these expectations that they have to abide by through the courts. And if they don't, they get removed. And as I've been doing probation for quite some time, I do know that that causes a disruption in youth's ability to be successful when they get removed from the community. Even though that, you know, these are concerning percentages within formal supervision, I have to say that the LIFT program was successful in a lot of these kids' lives, but unfortunately, it may have been too late.
Next slide, please.
So compared to formal supervision to students that have never had formal supervision, you can see that the percentages are successful. And this tells me that as we provided LIFT as a preventative measure, those kids are responding at a faster rate than those that are involved in the system. So this LIFT program and the model is showing me that this is a preventative measure, one, to get them re-engaged in school, get re-engaged in their community, and not get involved in the juvenile department.
Yeah, two other things I want to really highlight. If you look at the initial screen, this is still a significant number. Coming in at 9.6 on average. There are still many students in this group of 24 that have a score 18, 19, 22. And there are some students that come in a little bit lower. But I think that the two statistics that really stand out to me are that 87% of them have a downward trend in risk scores from the period of initial screening to the second screening. That tells me that our activities, the support they get in class, that means that they are reducing their risk with that support, and they are staying out of trouble. And we're going to get to that in a few minutes when we start talking about the cost of incarceration for youth in Oregon. But this is a significant statistic. I think using the JCP screening tool to think about students in this way outside of traditional educational factors. In the past, we've looked at, behavioral incidents or, times they've been suspended. We looked at attendance data, and we look at, passing classes, and you're not really working with the whole child there. I mean, those are school-based measures. When we started looking outside of school-based measures and developed this partnership with Washington County, and we're trained in how to give this screening tool, and it takes a while. It takes a while to get through one of these screenings, that it's a worthwhile investment in terms of how it's playing out in our current data. And so I think what you're looking at in this slide is proof that our program is cutting down some of this prison to pipeline in our own school. And if it was a year that wasn't impacted by COVID, we could probably look at some pretty compelling school-based discipline numbers along with these students, but we just haven't had any in COVID. So I think what we'll see in the next trend of the year is, and I'll make this prediction, that we'll see fewer suspensions and expulsions and even exclusions for students that are in the support program because staff are working with staff. So, that's my hope for this group going forward. Next slide, please. So we wanted to take a minute and just play one video for you. We collected some videos this last week, but I thought this was a really compelling one. And then we're going to hear from a parent in just a moment. Would we mind pushing play on this?
Many times. Okay, sorry. Jalisha, how do you feel Lyft has helped or benefited you?
It has helped me in many ways, catching up on schoolwork, making sure I'm caught up and doing okay with my Howie! I can't look
It's
at you.
okay.
I know I'm embarrassing.
You don't have to look at us.
Okay.
Yeah.
We started again. Just cut that out.
Hold on.
Just get the lollipop out of the little.
You can we can edit it out, so just, so you said the schoolwork. Yeah.
Oh, we start.
Okay, so does it help you to hear the question again?
Yes.
Okay.
Jalisha, how has Lyft helped or benefited you?
Lyft has helped me in many ways. The most important was schoolwork, myself, making sure I'm doing okay. Yeah.
What do you think Lyft could do to improve?
There's nothing that there can change of Lyft. Everything's perfect about it. Everybody's, supportive and in some type of way. Yeah, Carla.
If you knew the student, you would see just how amazing this transformation is for her to get up and know that this video was going to be shared with all of you today, and then just talk a little bit about her feelings. And I think if you were to come spend time in this classroom, that's a common experience you're going to hear from students. Next slide, please.
Many times. Okay, sorry.
I think the video is just playing again. Yeah. So at this time, I'd like to welcome Carrie Thomas. And John, do you want to introduce Carrie?
Yeah, Carrie is a parent of a student that has been involved in Lyft since he made the transition from 8th grade to Tualatin High School. We wanted Carrie to speak because I believe that the Lyft program has done some great collaboration with a parent in a case like this. Not only is she a parent of a student of Lyft, the student also has been involved in the juvenile department. So Carrie has had a lot of exposure to both sides. And so I want to welcome her. Thanks for being here, Carrie.
Yeah. Can I go ahead now?
Yeah.
I have only positive things to say about Lyft. My son, from a parent standpoint, you never think that your child is going to get involved in the juvenile system. I had to watch my son go to detention, which was an awful thing for a mother. I had to watch him go to Harkin's house for 3 months, which I didn't even know these things existed. To have John and the whole Lyft program be there to support us and not make us feel bad because we are in this situation as a family was super important. If you were to see Jacob today, he is my kiddo who now is passing all of his classes with C's, which are amazing for this child. He's playing lacrosse. He's pleases and thank yous at our house right now. I mean, my husband and I are just can't even believe it's the same child that we had 2 years ago. And I really feel it's all really because of Lyft. When when we were in really hard times and I could call John, and John came to my house one morning when Jacob wouldn't get out of bed. He hauled him out of bed and brought him to school for me. It's lovely to have John be there, this big man presence. And, my husband is in the home, but to have another man there to hold Jacob accountable and call kind of Jacob on his crap when he was doing it. Miss Samuelson in the Lyft class, that woman has been amazing. She has spent 2 to 3 hours every week with my child doing homework with him, not just for the Lyft class, but for every single class he has had. She's done weekends, she's done school breaks. She goes out of her way to make sure that Jacob has what he needs so he passes his classes. I mean, I appreciate all the other teachers in his school, but this woman and all the Lyft teachers have gone out of their way, and I can't thank them enough. Even the interns that are in the Lyft program, they've even come to our house during COVID and sat outside and done Spanish with him, or on their evenings or on their weekends. I mean, I can't thank them enough for their help. Another, I think, huge part of the program was the counselors. We've had 2 counselors that were connected with the program. And, we've seen many counselors before, but there's something about these Lyft counselors. They were in the school system. They could talk to the teachers. They understood our point of view, but they also understood how it related to the school. That was invaluable. We couldn't have gotten that anywhere, and we didn't get it anywhere besides the Lyft program. So, I mean, I just can't thank everybody enough for everything that they've done. And again, if you could see Jacob now, you wouldn't believe it is the same person that it was 2 years ago. So I love that this program is here, and I just thank everybody for having it.
Thank you so much, Carrie. And hopefully our board will have some questions for you too as we get to the end of the presentation here. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm glad he's doing wonderful. Next slide, please. So I won't bore you with too many of these details, but basically this program has evolved since 2008, even really kind of visioning work that happened with it in starting in the fall of 2017 when John and I started working together when I was an assistant principal. And over time it has evolved, and we've built some really strong partnerships with AmeriCorps, with local universities. The district has stepped up in helping us imagine what an re-engagement work looks like with the re-engagement specialists that were created. We created a 1.0 teaching position here by collapsing a previous program. At Tigard, they started teaching SRT with their dean, but without the partnership with Washington County and their willingness to release John, well, not really release John. John really works 2 full-time jobs. He works his full-time job working his caseload with Washington County, and then he works with our program. And through Washington County Juveniles Partnership, they've been able to bring in 4 or 5 interns. Then John really teaches them about case management and providing RAP supports, doing home visits. I think a lot of these kiddos would have really, we would have lost contact with them in traditional school structures, especially through COVID. So prior to the start of 2020, we had put a lot of pieces in place. I think I mentioned the JCP and burst assessments. Next slide, please. And then before COVID, we expanded some services at Tualatin High School. We designated a classroom space for Lyft. We started putting the flexible academic schedule together. That's because we added the addition. Well, it wasn't really an add. It was a rediscovery of some current FTE we had, along with some support from Measure 98. we were able to really envision a teaching position where this person could do this work, and we found really the perfect person to do that work. She has experience in both worlds. And I know that that's the hope for Tigard, and in conversations I've had with Brian, and I'll let him come in when we get to the ask slide at the end here, because there's always an ask when we brag on a program. But I think the adding of the interns, I talked about their value. Next slide. And then even in COVID, we were able to expand, adding the leadership course. Carrie partnered with Eric Wadsworth, and they wrote that curriculum together, finding that second level. Once students have worked through many of their immediate issues in SRT, giving them opportunities to be leaders in the school and in the program, I think is key to long-term success. When John talks about, how he's taught SRT over the years, leadership is one of the key elements into working through hardship in your life, finding a way to make positive experiences after you've experienced so many things. And they teach us about so many things that they need that are invisible to us. And I think that continuing to add those opportunities is something we'll move in the future. I talked about intensive case management support during comprehensive distance learning, and you heard that from our parents. Prioritize LIPI. These were some of the first students we brought in for supports, and they were coming on a regular basis. And they were some of the first kids that came back to school, other than some of our senior groups. And so seeing them get off the bus every day, and students who honestly were really struggling to make it from class to class to class when they were 9th graders, now as 10th and 11th graders are flourishing, involved in activities or athletics, passing most of their classes, if not all their classes, getting support. But that takes a team. It takes a village to provide that support when it's not just a fallback. Okay, next slide, please. So we talk about return on investment in our district. And so we wanted to give you some information for you to consider. And John is going to talk through most of this slide, but we wanted to bring some data forward about the cost of incarceration in Oregon, specifically for youth. And John had mentioned up front that we know we have a few kiddos who ended up in the system. And I want you to see how much that cost is, and how much investment up front when you think about our JCP data with students before their informal supervision, how much of an impact your investment here can have on our system in general. John, do you want to talk through some of these statistics?
Yeah, so Carrie actually shared, Carrie, the teacher of LIFT, shared the percentage of women at Coffee Creek that reported that they feel like they were incarcerated due to trauma, which is concerning, because like if we're not addressing the trauma in a lot of these young kids' lives, then they're at a huge risk of being incarcerated. So that's a very big percentage, and it's a very concerning one. But I checked with Kathy Baird, Oregon Youth Authority. She's the supervisor in Washington County, about how much it really costs taxpayers when a youth is incarcerated and sent to McLaren. Shocking, $139,000 per year. Now, out of the LIFT program, unfortunately, we've lost 11 kids since 2018 to current, to correctional setting through OIA. Now, granted, that could be some serious crimes that the courts could not look away from, but that's over $1 million. And so if we are able to provide more of a preventive measure on these kids early on, we're taking a good chance of keeping them out of the system and saving the state a lot of money.
I would just add to that two other pieces. One, this last bullet point, John had shared with me that in his conversations in Washington County Juvenile, that his team that he works with has noticed that there is significant drop off in statistics in Tigard-Tualatin versus other cities in Washington County. And they're working on how to summarize that analysis, and that hasn't been shared with us yet, but I think that's significant data. The other piece I wanted to share is the excitement of our partnership with Georgetown and working with Washington County and trying to grow a diversion program where students have the opportunity to be a part of the program instead of facing incarceration or facing formal supervision for crimes that are committed in the community. And so that's pretty exciting to say in a school environment. I think it's pretty unique. I can't tell you how many school districts in our county have reached out to me and said, tell me about this program. We want to come do a site visit. We've had, last year before COVID, we had several different school districts come up and spend a day with our LIFT team and talk through the process and ask about intake and all those pieces, because I think people are recognizing that you have to work with the whole child. Next slide, please. So, I hesitate somewhat to present this slide, but I was asked to do it, so I will oblige to our board members that asked me to do this. A few years ago, a team of us got together and we drafted a academic return on investment proposal to the district for re-engagement. Some of those pieces I think have kind of come to fruition through spending. Some haven't. I'm not quite sure where that process sits, but I know that it's complicated with all the different funding sources that have come and gone and how COVID kind of put the brakes on a lot of things. But if we were to kind of summarize the step forward from here, I think that the program has shown that it's an effective program, and I think it's time to move FTE from Measure 98 to the general budget. So, for example, at Tualatin, that would be 0.83. Actually, it'd be 1.0 because we have an existing staff position. 0.17 of that would come from Measure 98. The rest is already in our building budget at Tigard High School. I can't speak to what that staffing is, and Brian can come in a second. But I think taking that staff off of Measure 98, same for engagement specialists. At Tualatin High School, adding a halftime classified to our existing halftime classified in the den. So if you haven't been to Tualatin in a while, you'll notice that we revisioned our student affairs office, which is really the discipline office, into a re-engagement space and a regulation space. And we have, students come in, they assess themselves, what their stress and anxiety level is. They select into an activity until they become regulated, or they time out and they need support of an adult. And we, get them back to class. But right now we only have a halftime specialist in that room. And so the rest of our personnel are kind of spread thin in order to keep that space open during the regular school year. So I'd like to make that position a full 1.0. I don't know what that looks like at Tigard, so I can't speak for Brian, and he'll come in here in a second. I think we need to create a 1.0 classified position for IA support in both schools to be in the LIFT classroom. So right now we have an engagement specialist, and she's doing a bunch of universal supports. So she's calling kids that necessarily aren't in LIFT program, but supporting LIFT students specifically because that's where her passion is. But we need right now we have an AmeriCorps volunteer working in that position for peanuts, and we've been lucky to have the same one for 2 years at Tualatin because she's just so bought in to the work that we're doing here. But that needs to be a sustainable relationship. Those positions are really only meant to be a 1-year transition, and it's something we want to invest in because it's going to become a position that's going to require a lot of trauma-informed care and training. And so I think there needs to be a 1.0 classified position to support both classrooms, one at Tigard, one at Tualatin. And then the creation of a LIFT confidential manager. When we wrote the initial re-engagement AROI, we defined this position. And John kind of alluded to this earlier. Before COVID, he spent a lot of time working with our middle school programs last year to identify who are your most needy fresh ninth graders, for supports. And, we had 19 of those kids make it into and still in the program in their 10th grade year. So I think really we're taking this work down and extending it into middle school is going to be essential for our continued vertical alignment. I think one of the beautiful things that came out in the data earlier was that, 31% of some of the students on formal probation have moved into Creekside, but that's because that's how intervention should be structured. If they're not being successful in intervention here, then we find them an environment where they're going to be more successful in. And I think it would be interesting to look at how those students have done at Creekside, because I know many of them are flourishing when we speak with Russ. So, but I think beyond that, that confidential manager needs to work to support our employees on intensive case management and also being a bridge for the various arms of intervention that exist within schools and between schools. And so I think if I was going to say, what do we need to add in terms to keep this program afloat, I think this is what we need to start with. Brian, did you want to add anything in specific to Tigard?
Yeah, just for a little bit of context as to where we're at relative to this pilot, but over at Tigard. So we're currently out of Measure 98, we fund a 1.0 classified position to support SRT. Of the 3 classes that were discussed earlier, SRT is the only one that is functioning at Tigard, but it is a phenomenal program. And I can't even tell you where some of these kids would have ended up, especially this last year through COVID, if it hadn't been for Sue Wilson and her outreach and support. We have some program support dollars that come out of Measure 98, but that is the extent of the staffing that is coming out of 98 at this point. The way that we are able to function with SRT on the certified side is that we actually utilize our Dean of Students, Michael Shear, for part of his day to help teach those classes. But when it comes to the wraparound support and the student relationship and intervention, that is primarily serviced throughout the day from that 1.0 classified position in our AmeriCorps partnerships and the volunteers that we have in there. So this ask that is in there would legitimately be life-changing as far as what we're visioning at Tigard High School in partnership with what this pilot has done. And like I said, there's that ask is there, one, because of the data that Michael has said, but as you guys also know that when you're talking about staffing out of Measure 98, each year that staff member gets a COLA increase and benefits go up, that tail, so to speak, of cost for staffing out of a static budget starts to chip away at the overall efficacy of what we can do with those dollars. And so really taking the time to identify those programs that are showing a value and are showing through their data the way that they're able to positively impact kids, that's where some of this ask for reconsideration within the general fund budget can go to long-term support for everything else that we're also trying to accomplish from that static budget of Measure 98.
And I think to add on to what Brian said, I think the intent of Measure 98 is to use that funding to springboard great programs. But I think once you've shown that a program really needs to become solidified, that those innovation dollars should be spent somewhere else, and we should consider taking these onto our district's general budget. So at this point, if we go to the next slide and just open it up to any questions for any of us, and we'll try our best to answer. I really wish Carrie would have been here because she can answer some of the more specific classroom-based questions, but John and I could probably tackle those. Oh, great. Carrie is here. I didn't see her. I hadn't scrolled through a while. Carrie, do you want to say hi and add anything in? That I'm not sure when you came in. I'm so glad you're here. I'm sorry we started early.
Yeah. And hey, Michael, hold on. And Carrie, hold on one second. And so glad you're here. Patty, do you want to go ahead and pull the slides so maybe we can all kind of see each other if this is more of a dialogue part? Thank you so much.
Carrie, did you want to add anything before we take questions? I know I kind of talked through the classes and John and I kind of talked through them quickly, but I don't want to understate your role.
No, absolutely. I honestly think that I have the best job at Tualatin High School. So I have the privilege of working in a small classroom environment where I can talk to students just really intentionally about what's going on with school, with emotions. I have 14-year-olds who, talk to me about
where they're feeling anger in their body. I have, 15-year-olds who come into the classroom so that they can have a safe place just to, they can go to the den, but they can also come into the classroom, and they know that this is a place where they belong. I had a student who emailed a teacher and they felt so successful because they advocated for themselves. The teacher saw them as a human being and they saw the teacher as a human being and they felt connected. So there are so many ways that we are able to support students to be not only successful students, but successful human beings inside of a system that's sometimes difficult to navigate. Systems are hard and they're learning them, and they're learning how to be responsible. They're learning how to be kind to each other. They're learning how to be kind to themselves. The trauma-informed care is vital. I also worked at Coffee Creek for a couple of years, and so I've seen what trauma can do to a life if they don't understand what it does to their body, and what it does to their actions and all of these things. So I think that any investment that can be made into this program, both at Tigard and Tualatin, and if it can be spread around Oregon and the schools in the metro area, man, this is life-changing because these students are amazing. They're going to rule this world. And I think if we give them a voice, empower them to know that they have a voice, and then let them use it, there's no stopping them. And so we can only benefit. And, you're welcome inside my classroom at any time. Just know it's messy because teenagers are messy. Adults were messy. We had a lesson today about being perfect, and perfect's not the goal. Aiming high is the goal, but being perfect isn't. And they knocked it out of the park. They have insights and they have so much to offer. And if you want to come meet them, you're welcome in room 159.
Board members, I'm going to open it up since I continue to have challenges. But thank you all. Just such an important program to highlight, and just appreciate Carrie, your sharing, and the student video was just truly perfect. And just thank you all.
Yeah, I want to thank you all as well just for coming tonight and giving us an update. I did have some questions for you, and one of the questions I have is with the additional dollars you're asking for, how many more students you think you can serve with those additional dollars, or is that just kind of maintaining where we are?
I think for us at Tualatin, and I'll let Brian speak to how that would completely alter his program at Tigard, we would be able to expand the number of students, because I will keep, and we'll obviously have one teacher, and we would add 0.83 back into the program from just my budget. So I know that I would expand the classes that we offered and have a teaching partner for Carrie to work with. In addition, we would be able to have more focused case management. That's not just an outside resource. So right now we really rely on John and the interns, the social work interns, some of whom are bachelor's interns, some of whom are master's interns. And we would look at, developing out that arm with training and in-house classified position. We think we would be able to really recruit that person from our existing AmeriCorps partnership and really solidify some roots, and then add the AmeriCorps person back in. So we could increase case management. So I know that FTE allocation, both on the licensed and classified, would allow us to work beyond the kids we're already working with now. Brian?
Yeah, for us, it would really be able to give us an opportunity to go beyond just the 2 small sections of SRT that we're currently running, and really start to think about the overwhelming possibility of what a leadership component could bring to this program, as well as the psychology of wellness, and really start to be able to expand a program that when students are demonstrating that growth through that program, there are additional opportunities for them where there's just kind of it's not really a one and done, but it feels kind of like a one and done and then ongoing case management. And so just literally being able to triple the capacity of what we would, of the number of students that we're currently able to serve, and not only triple the capacity, but broaden what those experiences could be for them.
And Brian, just to clarify, so we have 40 at Tualatin High School. Do we also have 40 at Tigard High School? Is that 40 for both schools?
The data that we are looking at tonight is relative only to Tualatin High School. And so our numbers, I don't have the numbers for Tigard High School
Sure.
with tonight.
So when you say triple the capacities, whatever you have now at Tigard High School, triple. And I think, Michael, I saw something similar in your AROI that you guys thought you could increase capacity, but that was under the AROI ask. I'm not sure about what you're asking now, whether that would be around the same.
Yeah, I think we could at least double the capacity. I think we're going to have a lot to learn when the pandemic ends. As students re-enter school and as we're able to unpack all of the current trauma and concurring trauma, I think that the need is going to get even greater. So this is the time to invest. I feel a little bit like a salesman, but honestly, after 4 years of investment from our own school budget and from support through Measure 98 to create innovation, I think that data is compelling enough to say that, if we're really going to commit to supporting our students, that this is where the growth could happen.
Can I add on to Sharon's question? Not only could we increase the caseload, more importantly, we can develop more of a community outreach, which I believe is critical because we're only seeing these students in the school, and with our current staffing, we're restricted to the school. We don't have the ability to go out and do those community contacts, which is so important when you're dealing with kids that historically don't want to go to school. They have trauma at home. There is something that happened within the last 24 hours where they're dealing with a lot of emotions. So allowing that additional staff to be able to go and do those home visits to find out really what's going on and then report back to the school. I think that would be a tremendous investment in getting these kids back into the school and re-engaged. And then also having that relationship with the parent. We haven't been able to really reach out as much as we would like, but that's another piece that I see that with additional staffing, we'd be able to do that.
I just want to briefly say thank you for bringing in the parent voice. And Carrie, it's great to see you. Carrie Samuelson, I see you every weekend, and I knew you worked in the district, but didn't know that this was your role. So that was cool to hear from you. Carrie's one of the PWP drivers regulars. But yeah, this really appreciate the very in-depth presentation about the program. And I guess my question is for either David or Dr. Sue about how this translates into the budget process that we're navigating right now.
Director Moore, do you want to start, or I can give you some of my first thoughts?
Well, Director Bowman, it's timely because tomorrow we have some time reserved in cabinet in the morning to talk about some of the things that weren't discussed at the community level that staff and cabinet members have identified as needs. And so it's just a matter of where they fit into the funding puzzle. We have, we have both our general fund. Actually, we have three primary sources now to talk about: general fund, SIA, and ESSER, the federal dollars. So I think we could add this to the discussion in the morning.
Thank you, Director Moore, and which will mean that something else will have to come off the prioritization list. And so I think that's also part of the conversation. And just as a point of information, this would have been perfect for the community budget process. And so I think as we go forward, please keep that as a placeholder as we go into next year, much like our early learning and other programming. That is an excellent place to have this conversation. Fortunately, we have still some work to be done relative to sifting and sorting general fund board. I know that we've already had a robust conversation around the 9.1 state school fund. That if that sticks, that will also be a confound that we will have to navigate. But we look forward to more conversation tomorrow as the cabinet takes a look at the prioritization list, what's coming off, what room do we have, how can we possibly accommodate this, or what other funding sources may be available that we haven't yet thought about to try to address this ask.
Yeah, it seems to me that there's a way to braid ESSER funds into this.
Yeah, Director Zershmi, to that point, when we thought about that as a reminder that those are one-time funds. And so again, while I hear the concern around Measure 98, Measure 98 will be fully funded this year, which is the first time in a long time. So I think there are a number of funding sources we're going to have to put up on the board and work through. And then again, how do we balance all of the priorities?
I understand that. I'm just thinking that if we're seeing an increase in trauma because of COVID, and that LIFT is addressing that trauma.
Agreed.
There's a way to mesh that. But I also want to say, I really appreciate all the data on the return on investment of this and how much it costs to incarcerate a kid. But I also want to go back to something that I'm pretty sure I said back in 2018, when you first came to the board to ask for the increase in FTE, which is there's a human cost here. And I think what I said at the time was, if we can help one kid stay out of prison, this is a worthwhile program. And what I'm hearing from you tonight is that you've saved probably 5 kids, at least, from going into the system. And so that is a tremendous human cost that we have saved. And I'm looking at our parent, Carrie Thomas, and thinking how very real that cost is for her and her family. But for society as a whole, it's also a huge cost just on the human level, forget the dollars. And so for that reason alone, given the results that we're seeing with this program, it would be foolhardy for us to not expand it. To keep it even at the same level would be okay, but if we can expand it, that seems like a no-brainer.
I want to tell you a story. I was talking to a staff member at Tualatin High School, and we were conversing about the SROs, and she gave me an example. She gave me a story that would happen to her that I think kind of encapsulate what LIFT is all about. And that is that she said that there was a student who had she was in charge of vending machines and the funds, stocking them, the funds go to support the school. And a student had broken into the vending machines, vandalized them somehow. And so she worked actually with the LIFT staff, probably John, I'm guessing. And rather than arresting the kid, they decided to not necessarily call the police, but have taken care of their own student in our own community. And that student did service with the staff person that he stocked the machines with her for a number of weeks or maybe months. And she said something really cool happened, and that is that she formed a relationship with the student. The student completely understood what he did, contributed back to community, and she just thought it was a win-win. She had nothing but positive things to say. And the reason I bring that up, because I think it folds in nicely to our SRO work, and just with John's knowledge, and actually entire LIFT staff, with their knowledge of restorative practices and working with the SROs. I just think I agree, it's a win-win. I'd love to see us, I know that we have constraints, but I'd love to see creative measures to expand the program in the fall. And I just want to say I have been in room 159. I think it was before you, Carrie, but I've had the pleasure and opportunity to see the students in these SRT classes, and wow, amazing. I've been deeply impacted by the students, and I'm on the other side too at Coffee Creek, and I haven't been in there for a year, but I see, these women, and they talk about their kids who are also at risk. So I'll stop talking. I just want to have enough to say positive things about LIFT. So thank you, everybody who's part of that program.
Yeah, I can't help but think that it would have been great to have this during the community process, and I hope that we make a placeholder next year, even if it's not an additional ask or anything next year. Just because I am positive this is something that our community doesn't even know is happening. And Principal Delurba, when you're telling a compelling truth that does not make you a salesman, you're just telling a very compelling truth. That you're just telling the story, and that's what makes all of us want to say, where do we sign up and how can we find the money to fund this? But yeah, hearing about the lives changed is just, it's amazing. Thank you, Carrie and Carrie.
Well, and I also want to remind everyone that, again, one of the odd little silver linings of COVID is we now have everything recorded. And so if we feel that Michael's team's presentation is an important conversation or presentation for individuals in our budget community, advisory committee to hear, there's that opportunity to give them the link and the time start. But clearly, Michael and team, a powerful presentation tonight, and thank you for your advocacy. I also wanted to offer up, Director Fields, if there was anything that you cared to share as well.
No, thank you. Just, I think, to the team and Director Fox, I know you've been a big advocate for LIFT and making sure that they were shared tonight, which is awesome. And I think it's just us talking about, where we can take this presentation and conversation into and go into our process around budget, et cetera. So just nothing but kudos to the team. And it was great to hear from you, Carrie, as a parent. Just sort of made me teary hearing your story. So really appreciated you being here and glad it had the impact that it did. So thank you for that and the leadership of the whole LIFT team.
Okay, so I think with that, we will close our reports and discussion items. And again, thanks, Michael and your team. And we will move to our action items. And we will start with Teacher Appreciation, Resolution 2021-12, and that is Director Rose. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair Wolf. We have a resolution for you this evening. It is the first week of May is knocking at the door, and that first week of May is Teacher Appreciation Week, and arguably probably the most important time for us to honor our teachers after the last 13, 14 months now that we're going on. So I will turn it over to you. I know that you have assigned, I believe, Director Emerson to read the resolution.
Actually, I'll give it right to Karen.
Awesome.
Tigard-Tualatin School District 23J, Resolution 2021-12, recognizing the outstanding contribution of Tigard-Tualatin School District teachers. Whereas teachers mold future citizens through guidance and education, and whereas teachers encounter students of widely differing backgrounds, and whereas our country's future depends upon providing quality education to all students, and whereas teachers spend countless hours preparing lessons, evaluating progress, counseling and coaching students, and performing community service, and whereas our community recognizes and supports its teachers in educating the children of this community, now therefore be it resolved that the Tigard-Tualatin School District Board of Directors proclaims May 3 through 7, 2021 to be Teacher Appreciation Week, and be it further resolved that the Tigard-Tualatin School District Board of Directors strongly encourages all members of our community to join with it in personally expressing appreciation to our teachers for their dedication and devotion to their work.
Thank you, Director Emerson. Well, before we make the motion to certainly approve the resolution, I just want to open it up for board members to share their appreciation for what has been just such a year
Well, you cut out there at the end, Chair Wolf, so I'm not sure if you were done talking or not. But in case you are, I'll go ahead. Yeah, it's been a year, and our teachers are just amazing. I mean, all teachers are. You don't get into the business unless you are a special kind of person. But it's been more than anybody ever expected. And what's not unexpected is how our teachers have risen to the challenge and done such an amazing job teaching our kids online, and then hybrid, and then let's change again, let's change again, let's change again. And so I am filled with gratitude. And so I just wanted to make sure that our teachers know we love them. They're working hard and we appreciate them so much.
Yeah, it does feel like, you know, we do the resolution every year, and I know we mean it every year, but it's just such an important thing. I think it's weird being friends on Facebook with a lot of teachers that I had in high school. But it's also been kind of hard because you sort of see under the hood that you don't see as a student, the personal challenges that are coming up. And those surfaced a lot during COVID. Teachers saying, you know, I've been teaching for so and so many years, and this is by far the hardest experience. I'm working twice as hard. You know, you saw dining room tables get converted into remote learning desks, and you know, teachers using their home Wi-Fi and trying to parent their kids in the middle of the school day, and just so many next level sacrifices and contributions that our educators have made this year. So it's just a resolution, but it is really sincere, and much gratitude from your school board.
Yeah, thanks. I agree with the previous comments, but I agree. It almost seems like we need something bigger, or I don't know. It does seem kind of anticlimactic to have another resolution like we've always had. But I don't know what else we can do except say thanks and say we're sincere about it, because I think we all appreciate the year and everything we've been through. So yeah, let's have fireworks or something. Maybe you can have fireworks at the graduations, or I don't know. Thanks, Jill. Thank you.
So funny. Actually, I like volunteering to read this, because then I get to say out loud all of these things that we do mean. So that's why I selfishly get to volunteer for that. But definitely thank you to all of our teachers. Pivot's the word. Unprecedented, all those words that they've been living, not just, I mean, because they had to do that work of pivoting and living in unprecedented times. It's yeah, just picturing them every day managing all their little squares and and doing it so well. It's amazing. So thank you, TTSD teachers.
So with that, I'll move to approve resolution 2021-12 to honor the outstanding contributions of our Tigard-Tualatin School District teachers as presented.
Second.
This is on outstanding.
Motion was made and seconded to approve the resolution as presented. Any further discussion? I will only add that I am certain our amazing volunteers will take care of our teachers next week. So with that, I will do a quick roll call on the action items. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Director Bowman?
Aye.
Director Emerson?
Aye.
Director Fox?
Aye.
Director Zertsme?
Aye.
And Director Wolf is an aye. Motion carries. And again, huge thank you, and just so much gratitude for our educators this year and every year. So with that, we will move to our second item, and that is the calendar. And we will act on that this evening, obviously, and that goes to Director Ebert and Director Rose.
All right. Well, good evening, Chair Wolf and all members of the board.
That's a hard act to follow, but we do need a calendar. So it's important that we do this work as well, right? So this evening we bring you a revised 21-22 calendar for your review and adoption. We appreciated all the comments and the conversation. We had a chance to slow the roll and come back together and review the calendar for 21-22. And you are seeing us head back to a typical calendar for us in TTSD at this time. We have option A and B that go back to 190 days for our licensed staff. This does not require any additional bargaining with our licensed union. And we are back to 171 days for our students with typical start times after Labor Day and ending in the typical third week of June. So I'll hand it over to Tracy at this point. So we'll share survey data that we got back from staff.
Thank you, Director Ebert. So we sent out the typical survey for staff to provide their feedback on the calendar. We had 458 responses. Would have been great to have a few more, but what we did here is 71% chose option B. We have 29% choosing option A. Of that, you have the feedback. I think the biggest piece of feedback is that the folks really appreciate that Wednesday before Thanksgiving. That's feedback we get every year about that week and how many students are typically out anyway leading up to the Thanksgiving holiday. A lot of families travel. And so that would probably be the biggest factor of why folks are choosing that Wednesday before Thanksgiving in relation to adding on a day at the end of the year. There was a couple of comments in favor of a plan to start prior to Labor Day next year. A couple of folks in favor of actually adding on more time. And so we look forward to exploring those options as we move into an earlier planning for next year's calendar.
With a goal of also trying to get a 2-year calendar in play for next year. Well, for the following 2 years. Yeah. Any questions?
So talk to me a little bit about the difference in the number of days in each semester between the two calendars, because it is significant, and I want to make sure that people understand the reasoning and behind having one semester be longer than the other.
Well, I can tell you that there are a couple different schools of thoughts on that, but most of our staff that we talk to appreciate a longer amount of days in the last semester. And after winter break, having the additional time built in is really helpful. So that was, the strongest feedback that we had for having that those extra days after winter break.
And are we in fact planning on having CDL days instead of snow days whenever possible next year, if we do have winter and weather issues next winter?
Yeah, that we have to have more conversation about that, and we haven't done that yet. So hopefully that's the thinking.
Were we able to get any more parent input that was a little more diverse and representative of our district, or just staff?
Just staff for the current survey that we put out. The plan going forward with a longer runway around gathering feedback is to get a lot more community involvement in calendar development.
Yeah, we had gone for having a 2-year calendar before, and then COVID kind of interrupted us and messed up our system that was pretty good, because I really don't like to have a calendar sort of sprung on parents like, oh, here's going to be the start date of school. Well, that's only a few months from now. Whereas if it's a year in advance, it's much better for people to be able to do that long planning. So I do understand that issue that parents, that concern that parents have expressed to us.
Sure.
Along those lines, though, I'm disappointed that the conversation wasn't around our kids' needs, and that the word vacation was more of a focus than putting our kids first.
I was wondering if there could be some explanation around, because we talked about adding 3 days on, and I know that we talked about the summer school. And Dr. Sia, would you mind? We had a conversation earlier today, or yesterday. I can't remember now. We had this morning. Would you mind just paraphrasing quickly what you told me about, so just in context for anybody watching, around the rationale? We're just going back to the normal days that we usually have, and how the summer school fits in the 2-year calendar.
Yeah,
I thought that was helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Director Fox. So the short version here is that you want to have, the purpose of having an extended calendar is to maximize the amount of instruction that's given throughout the year, not at the end of the year. And so relative to the parent feedback that was received, the only place to put additional days at that point was on the back end of the calendar, where it would do the least amount of good. And so hence the reason for a pump the brake and run a thorough process that will also engage TTEA as part of that conversation. They have been all in relative to wanting, as identified by Director Rose this evening, to have additional days to instruct, but they need to be strategically placed either at the very front end of the calendar or throughout the remainder of the calendar. And we have limited options within the body of the calendar relative to long breaks in time, such as winter break and spring break. And no one wants to disrupt those breaks, and understandably so. The purpose of then with the summer is to provide not mandatory unless the state comes back, which had been their original thought relative to summer recovery this year, was to mandate that we would extend the school year. Unless they do that, this would always be an opportunity for all students to engage in summer experience that is both engaging, creative, project-based, but also has the opportunity to reinforce reading habits, mathematics practice, but to do it in a way that is a bit more relaxed and flexible during the summer, and provides 4 weeks of a very strong enrichment program, which will get launched this summer. Hence the reason for using the ESSER dollars to provide summer school, not just this summer, but the next 3 summers following, so that we can maximize the amount of time students have access to teachers. We know based on research, over 30 years of worth of research, that the longer the breaks in time for students, the greater the opportunity for gaps to blow back open and for skills to be lost. And so what you're trying to do is minimize the extent of time that students are not getting reinforced for those particular skills and opportunities to practice. In a lot of cases, what we're trying to do is get maximum number of weeks during the year for full-on instruction, take about a 3-week break, then have 4 weeks of creative instruction and thinking outside the box and enrichment instruction, 4 weeks off of that. But those breaks on either side, the 3 weeks on one side and 4 weeks potentially on the other, lessens the impact of lack of instruction versus a full 2.5, almost 3 months of no instruction whatsoever. And that's really the goal here, is to provide as many opportunities not only to address the initial impact of COVID, but really going forward, how do we continue, as we talked about earlier this evening, particularly for students who are impacted in a number of ways, that amount of growth that needs to happen for them that is well beyond a year. How do you continue to encourage that and provide opportunity for that? And we believe that coupling summer with an extended week calendar going forward will certainly go a long ways to addressing that.
I would like to also point out that it might be difficult for people who are watching this on the YouTube live streaming, but we're looking at two different calendars, an option A and an option B. And one of the big differences between the two calendars that Director Bernard has pointed out is that in the option B calendar, we have more days in the first semester and fewer in the second semester. And the benefit of that, that he points out, and I agree with, is that we tend to have more winter closure events in the first semester than in the second. And so it's better to have more days in the first semester so that if we do lose days, we can balance them out more easily. The other big difference between the two calendars, just so that members of the public know this, is that in our option A, we've got kids going to school the day before Thanksgiving, and in our option B, that's a non-contract day for our teachers. So if my fellow board members don't have further comments on the calendar, then I move that the Tigard-Tualatin School District Board of Directors adopt the 2021-22 school year calendar option B as presented for second reading.
A second.
Chair Wolf, I believe, is still navigating internet connectivity issues. So I will, the motion's been made, so I will just chair this portion of the vote. Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll move to a roll call vote. Director Emerson?
Nay.
Director Wolf, Chair Wolf, excuse me.
Aye.
Director Zerschmied?
Aye.
Director Fox?
Aye.
And I will vote aye. Motion passes 4-1. And with that, I believe we've reached the end of our agenda. So the meeting is adjourned at 8:41. See you, everyone.